we're looking at the outer planets and the way that they specifically interact to create change, transformation, growth, healing, and all the different symbolism that they bring into the realm of love and relationships. If you want, you can register for that on that page. It's $20. And if you cannot attend the live webinar, once you sign up, you also will receive a download link afterwards. You can download the talk and watch on one of your devices at your own on your own time. So anyway, that's it for announcements. Now let's get into our talk for the day. And I'm going to put this up on the screen first of all. Okay. So here we can see that Saturday, February 10th, we have Mercury in Aquarius at the 8th degree coming through in a square to Jupiter in Taurus at the 8th degree. That means that right now, we're on Thursday today, the 8th, that you should be able to feel this now. You might have been feeling it the past couple of days. Mercury moves pretty quickly, and I feel like, Mercury is like the moon in that sometimes the application range is a little bit further out because of how quickly it moves. But you will for sure be experiencing this most vividly on Saturday, Friday or Saturday, the 9th and the 10th of February. Extend it to the 11th or 12th as it goes through the separation range of 3 degrees. So maybe extend it all the way till, say, the 12th on Monday. But yeah, this is a weekend transit that's coming right after the new moon. So I'm just going to show you what I think we should watch for. So 5 themes to watch for, as I always do. But now I'm going to also take you into my process. Like, how do I arrive at whatever I'm going to talk about for the day? Because some of you have been asking, like, at some point it'd be really cool to see how you prepare. Maybe there's something you could take away for your own work with astrology, or the way in which you look at things and try to discern meaning on your own as students or even content creators out there. So I don't think that I have like some magical process. It just works for me. But so I'm going to show you like how I gathered the information that I will then synthesize at the end. So number one thing that I notice about this, and this is something that has been a big part of my practice for going on about a year, although I've only started including it in my YouTube analyses in the past couple of months, really. But one of the things that I've always done is to look at dignities.
Yo,
Right?
Balkan, what's up,
This is
bro?
something that all traditional astrologers do. But
How are you, man?
for
Nice,
me,
dude.
the
Heck
dignities
yeah.
that I started looking at were
Oh
mostly
yeah, buddy.
domicile and exaltation rulers, and then
Amazing. That's
slowly
great
I've started
news.
to
How are you,
include
my man?
things like bound rulers and decans and so forth. But one of the things that I like to do is I like to gather what's standing out about the dignities. And to me, one of the things that stands out with this Mercury and Jupiter square is that Mercury is in the bound of Venus and the excuse me, the domicile of Saturn. Okay. And then Jupiter happens to be in the bound
Why
of
won't it let me
Mercury and
pin
the
this
domicile
message?
of
Why?
Venus.
Like, why?
So,
Why, Twitch?
we could we're starting to create a little web here. In the meantime, we can see that Venus is just barely inside her bound. Let me double check that. Might be moving into the next bound. I should have looked at that in advance.
Come on, Twitch.
Yeah. So Venus is oh, do I have that right? Hold on. Let me just double check something. Yeah. So Venus has just left her own bound.
Come on,
and is
Twitch.
now
Why?
in the
Like,
bound.
why?
Of
They're trying to
Saturn
sense you,
and
bro.
the sign of Saturn. In the meantime, Saturn is in the bound and exaltation of Venus. So we have a really interesting set of patterns connecting the planets right now. So I'm going to write these down. And this is what I do, like on a little piece of paper. And it looks sort of like this.
Why? They won't even link you? What? Like, come on.
And I'm not counting them like they have some kind of weight. Like I'm not like weighing them or anything. I'm just noticing patterns. So like with Venus, we have Venus equals Saturn, because Venus is in the domicile of Saturn.
Come on.
And the
Dude,
bound.
they're silencing you, man. Why? It won't let me pin it.
Saturn
Like, why?
is in the exaltation of Venus and the bound of Venus. Now, I could look at the rulership of, Saturn being in Jupiter's
I'm
rulership
losing my
as well, but
mind, dude.
I'm counting up sort of
I
what
can't. I
planet
tried, man. I'm
it has
trying.
the most influence over what planet. So you can see that Venus
I
and Saturn
tried,
have
man.
this amazing cooperative dimension to them right now. That's the point. When I look at Mercury, I can see that Mercury is in the bound of Venus and Saturn. See? So you start to see the pattern. And then Jupiter, who Mercury is squaring, is in the bound of Venus and Mercury, is in the bound of Mercury and the domicile of Venus. So when I look at this list and I think, okay, like this is pretty profound. Um, and then in the meantime, notice something else, right? Well, sorry, before I keep going, and this is why I've never taken you guys really behind the curtain before to explain the way that I start seeing and collecting my data. So I apologize if it's a little clunky explaining it. But basically, when you look at this, what stands out? To me, what stands out is Saturn and Venus. Okay. Saturn and Venus have this really strong power in terms of the dignities in the sky right now that are actually subtly informing the way we ought to read Mercury and Jupiter's square. Now, I think it's remarkable that on this day, Moon will be in bound of Venus, conjoining Saturn, right? And in the exaltation of Venus. So even the moon, which is like a daily barometer, is in the exaltation and bound of Venus and moving into a conjunction with Saturn. And the moon is like a mirror. It really shows us what's going on. So now we have a Mercury Jupiter square that is being informed on a very deep level by multiple connections in the sky between Venus and Saturn. Okay, so that's the first thing that I do. And so what I do is I say to myself, okay, um, what I'm really getting is that this Mercury Jupiter square is brought to you on behalf of Venus and Saturn. That's a little different. I mean, Venus and Saturn are the domicile rulers of Jupiter in Taurus and Mercury in Aquarius. So, on a certain level, you can see where in the past, when I didn't use the bound rulers, I might get it right. Like a significant number of times, the domicile rulers will be enough. But when you look at how much Venus Saturn is being re-emphasized in other ways in the sky right now, you sort of go, oh, okay, it's a lot stronger than I might have thought. So for me, including the bound rulers has been a really cool exercise as of late. Anyway, so I start going, okay, this is a Mercury Jupiter square brought to you on behalf of a strong Venus Saturn emphasis. So after I look at the bounds, I'm led to this emphasis. The next thing that I will often do after I take note of this, in addition to starting to think about and often write down reflections on what does Mercury Jupiter, what do Mercury Jupiter squares look like when they have strong considerations of Venus Saturn in their exchange? And that's like a creative exercise that I'll just start free writing about. And then I'll go on to the next point here, which is I will often pull cards. Now, I know that some
God.
of you have, in my mind, a really bizarre prejudice against cards, and I don't mean to call anyone out, but like every time that I draw cards, there are at least three or four, in my opinion, highly ignorant people who seem to think that astrology is better than tarot. And I will just tell you that if that's you, just change the channel. But I feel really adamant about that because astrological elitism is, in my mind, it's a kind of form of divinatory prejudice, and I think it's really ugly. Now, you don't have to be a practitioner of tarot; it doesn't have to be your preference, but to say that it is somehow less than, or that there's no meaningful overlap between an entire historical system of divination and another system is just closed-minded. Systems of divination can speak in so many different interesting ways and correlations. And practitioners of one form of divination are rarely practitioners of only one form of divination, historically, by the way. So, that being said, and sorry for my soapbox, this was my morning tarot spread, and I don't care what you think. So, now the way it's really important that you understand the way in which this is framed. I am not going and saying, give me a direct correlation. I'm saying, how do I think? I have now established that Mercury and Jupiter are squaring one another and that there's this strong underlying emphasis on Venus and Saturn. and I've done some free writing about what I think that means. I'm going to ask the cards to now speak to the archetypes and help me creatively move my mind around. It's like I'm circumambulating the shrine of this archetype in the sky, and I'm just pulling beads and meditating. These images, I'm asking the oracle of the tarot to help fill out my understanding, help participate in the meditating on these symbols in the sky. And they can do so by juxtaposition, by contrast, by direct correlation, by kind of one-to-one correspondence. So you have to open your mind to many different ways in which the cards may be speaking. And this exercise is really good for diviners in general to do, as long as you don't try to make too, I think it's a mistake to try to make too direct kind of a one-to-one correlation with anything when you, like if you're, I'm going to show you, I use the I Ching as well. Don't try to get too literally one-to-one with things, but use it to creatively stimulate. All right, so I pulled 3 cards, and I pull them in no order, just 3 cards, and I let the 3 kind of speak. So the first one that comes up is the Queen of Wands. And I see this as a kind of Empress motif that fits pretty nicely with Mercury squaring Jupiter. Mercury squaring Jupiter in a feminine sign feels like the intelligence
But it's coming from
of
Ali
the
G.
queen.
Oh, white boy.
Why? Because Jupiter in Venus's sign is associated with feminine leadership. So Jupiter in a Venus-ruled sign with so much emphasis on Venus and Saturn looks to me like the kind of power and authority maybe of an elder or veteran or wise woman, because Venus Saturn is associated with, say, the crone energy or the wisdom of the feminine and its power to structure and shape things, as well as the kind of veteran, mature, wise qualities of the feminine. That's a Venus Saturn combination that's in the sky. And it also speaks to the intelligence of the queen as a Mercury Jupiter combination when Jupiter is in a feminine domicile, the domicile of Venus and the exaltation of the moon in Taurus. So I start, first of all, I just start kind of going, oh, okay. Yeah, so we've got a queen speaking, and that feels right for the amount of sort of authority, structure, power, intelligence being placed on the feminine. This is how my mind works. I'm not saying that's the only way to look at it, and I would love to hear what you guys think about it too. Again, I'm just taking you backstage and showing you what I do. The next card that I drew is the Eight of Wands. And when I pair these two together, I get the really interesting signification of swiftness and unprohibited movement and action. I start thinking about the queen as executing things and her intelligence and what she wants to get done with like a smoothness and a swiftness, and also kind of the power of momentum. You know, it's like when you have momentum on your side, things can really move. And so I get this feeling of like Jupiter, Mercury. Gosh, when those two planets come together, big ideas can be implemented successfully and often very swiftly. Now, with the Queen, this would suggest to me a kind of incorporation of will, intelligence, and femininity. The yin, speaking, acting swiftly, intelligently. And it's a kind of veteran, mature, feminine quality of mind and action. And I start thinking, yeah, that's Venus Saturn so emphasized in the sky right now. That's Jupiter in a feminine sign. And then Mercury in Aquarius squaring Jupiter, kind of the big picture and the executive thinking that you get from Mercury and Jupiter, but for kind of like unprohibited swift action and results. It's a very powerful signature, right? But I still get the feeling that this is coming from a feminine space, a space that probably privileges things that the yin is interested in, relationships, and relating and movement of between opposites, for example, which the yin is very good at doing, and also things that move on behalf of sensuality, embodiment, worldliness, relationship, diversity, plurality. These are kind of feminine archetypes. So anyway, again, I'm just kind of taking you into my imagination here. Now, then I draw one last card here, and the last card that I drew was the High Priestess. I love this card because this card, to me, paired with the Queen, now we get these two juxtaposing images, and this is where I think the whole thing really comes together. So now we have, oops, let me get these kind of aligned. Oops, can't really see. There we go. You can see her now. So now, to me, I look at these three cards and I go, okay, well, we have an image, a juxtaposed queen-like image of the High Priestess. Remember, one of the things that Jupiter and Taurus can represent would also be a priestess. A queen, an empress, or a priestess would all be good Jupiter and Taurus archetypes. Depending on what else is in the sky, remember, we have the Venus-Saturn connection is very strong right now. Both are in feminine signs in Capricorn and Pisces. We have the Mercury-Jupiter connection between Aquarius and Taurus. And so what I'm getting here is we're talking about the executive power of the feminine quality to do things, to move things on behalf of the values of Jupiter and Taurus, right? Like a sensual, embodied, feminine, pluralistic, relational dimension of life that is seeking to move and act and take us somewhere. The High Priestess to me comes in and says, make sure that there's emotional intelligence. Make sure that you're using your intuition. The Queen and the Eight, the Queen of Wands and the Eight of Wands together are both fiery. And they could suggest that although the feminine is leading, it's not dialed in enough to its emotional feeling body, its intuition, and the more emotional dimension of the feminine. So, the feminine has many different dimensions. Yin has many different ways of expressing itself. And right now you could say that there's, maybe the combination of the kind of, let's call it a more fiery feminine being contrasted with a more watery feminine. And the two are having to work together somehow in executing plans and trying to pursue desires. And the High Priestess says, make sure that the body, sensitivity, emotionality, compassion, empathy, maybe a more slow developing and sensitive process is being enacted alongside the very strong, executive, willful, feminine queen on the other side. You see what I mean? So I look at these as interesting, contrasting images. And there's many ways you could look at them, right? When I see that, I start thinking about Mercury, Jupiter, and what kinds of things Mercury, Jupiter is trying to bring together. You have Mercury in Aquarius as a very mental, rational, galaxy brain kind of image. You have Jupiter in Taurus as the queen in her garden, looking at how she wants to organize the kingdom and what she wants to do based on what she finds to be valuable, desirable, what her ambitions are. So when I think about that, I think, okay, like there's, again, so much emphasis on Taurus right now. We know that Jupiter and Uranus are coming together in Taurus, trying to enact significant changes and breakthroughs in how we experience pleasure in the body. And so I start to see that this is a kind of mind-body connection that's trying to be established right now. And it's about making sure that the changes we're making on behalf of the Venusian realm aren't happening so quickly and so impulsively that we haven't taken time to really feel into what we're trying to build or create and what it's doing for us emotionally. And this, to me, is where Venus-Saturn comes in. Venus-Saturn is like a really mature, and it's, remember, from Capricorn to Pisces, we're talking about a much more mature, long-term vision that has a kind of emotional depth and an emotional wisdom and maturity, like the kind that you would get in the realm of the grandmother who's lived a long time, who's seen many things come and go, and has something to say to the young woman who is eager and ambitious right now about something. That's kind of what I'm getting. But it's all within, to me, I'm kind of placing it all within the realm of a very strongly emphasized yin. It's sort of like, let's imagine, for example, and I'm just making this up off the top of my head. Let's imagine, for example, that you've just had a child. It's your first child. Is a woman sitting, she's starting to plan out, or maybe she's pregnant, and she's starting to plan out what her life will look like. the grandmother comes along and sits down and listens, intently, like, wow, this is a really great plan you've got. And she just sort of puts her hand on the young woman's knee and says, sweetheart, I want you to just remember that when the baby actually arrives, these plans may not be the ones that you stick with. Uh, the presence of this child in your life could change your heart, could change your body, could change your mind, could change your intentions, could change your vision for life in ways that you can't yet anticipate. So I want you to at least stay open to that, How hard is it, when you're, I mean, and I think that this is universal. It doesn't really matter what gender it is, right? But what, how hard is it to stop and pause when you're trying to create the most beautiful life, when you're trying to create the most beautiful setup, when you're trying to create the most stable, peaceful, gentle, easy, controlled, luxurious, abundant setup, and you're sort of galaxy braining it, and you're trying to create a garden, a beautiful garden that you can enjoy and feel happy in. This is kind of what's trying to get created through the Mercury-Jupiter connection from Aquarius to Taurus. But there's kind of a wise grandmotherly presence that says, don't go so quickly that what you're creating is a little dissociated from the messy emotional complexities and chaos of life. Don't go so quickly that you're not including some deeper and more sensitive and thoughtful considerations for how your feelings might change, or for how what you're building may affect others, or how over the long run it may limit you in certain ways. Or you see what I mean? So what I'm getting is that there's a few women in the war room, and there's blueprints laid out on the table, and everything that's getting created. There's so much of an emphasis on the, like, again, the sort of Jupiter Uranus conjunction that's coming up. Like, what is beautiful? What makes me feel good? What's stable? How do I enjoy life? How can I shift how I enjoy and remodel so that there's more ease, peace, balance, flow, enjoyment, stability, control? And then there's Venus Saturn in the mix. This is a wise, kind of elder, more mature and long-term visionary feminine voice saying, like, just be careful. Now, the next thing that I do in my process, and I'm just kind of free flowing this morning to show you a little bit of how I work. From this, I would usually derive a series of what to watch for points, and you wouldn't be seeing this part, right? So I've been including it a little bit more lately with the bounds and stuff. But yeah, so my morning I Ching reading comes next. So in the I Ching, I cast the I Ching and I ask the same question. How can I understand through the hexagrams of the I Chings, another ancient divinatory system, this combination of planetary events? And today I'm going to show you what this looks like, because I think it's kind of cool. So I'm going to show you what the hexagram actually looks like. Whoops. Okay, there we go. So I'm going to draw the lines in. So it's a 6-lined figure, and excuse me if it doesn't look very good, but it's not totally. That's the basic idea. So here we have in the top trigram, which is the top 3 lines, we have broken lines, which are all yin. They're dual, which is, remember, the one and the many. So the yin is the many. And one of the ways that the many gets signified is not by one continuous unified line, but by broken lines that have the nature of being many, diverse, particular, different, and related. That's yin, broadly speaking. Now, yang on the bottom is going to be 3 solid lines, and that trigram is called heaven. So in this hexagram, which is number 11 in order, it is sometimes called peace. And it's called peace because you have earth over heaven. And so when the low, if you think about heaven, you think about like the power of the stars and the gods. In astrology, that's kind of the equivalent. Usually that would be above and earth would be below. But then you have the idea of the high ruling over the low. But when it's flipped and you have earth above and heaven below,
what the fuck?
then it is as though heaven has come into the service
What
of the
the
earth.
fuck? They're
It's a very, very
censoring it.
beautiful
They're
image.
censoring Nikki.
If you think, for example, about uh,
What?
in a traditional like courtship sense, and if that doesn't, if that offends your sensibilities, my apologies. But like think about it like this. What's really nice is to see the masculine sort of in chivalry, sort of
What the
subordinating
fuck, man? They're
itself to the
censoring
feminine, like
Nikki.
worshiping it. So here you have kind of the image of the subordination of heaven to earth. That heaven is the orchestrator of all things, the creative essence, the yang, and earth is the feminine, the embodied world. And but rather than heaven being above earth, heaven is below earth, which means it's in the position of serving and of pouring out its resources in support of the earth. So imagine the most beautiful garden you could possibly make. That garden is a reflection of something in the Platonic world, like an idea in the mind of God. You set out the blueprints on a table and you're going to build that garden, and it is so beautiful. And then it actually comes to be. It actually comes into shape and form. The only way it could do so is if that blueprint actually somehow comes down to occupy the earthly position, such that the earthly position gets elevated to looking like heaven. Do you see what I mean? So in peace, we have this beautiful image of something worldly becoming almost looking like something heavenly. And one of the lines, the fifth line in particular of this hexagram, right here, which is called the ruling line, and it corresponds with the second line below. This, as the ruling line, would be yin, or what is lowly, in the position of the king or the queen, whereas the corresponding is a yang line in the second position. So this line refers to the marriage that the emperor grants, allows for like a commoner, just an average person, not anyone of royalty, to marry the princess. Now, again, you don't have to like any of that gendered language, but the idea behind it is really important. That is that these two lines corresponding suggest that something of everyday worth. Like, have you guys ever seen the movie Aladdin? Right? It's like Aladdin, a street rat that, but somehow he becomes prince. The genie grants his wish, and his status, caste, class, socioeconomic status, race, gender, creed, whatever, does not matter. His worth comes from within. And so the marriage of these two lines in this hexagram speak to something of earthly value that's just regular, just a regular common kind of thing, being granted the status of heaven. That's at the core of what this hexagram means. And so now, in this hexagram, interestingly, the fifth and sixth lines were changing. One of the things that means you have to pay attention to is the sixth line meaning as well. Now, when you get up that high in the hexagram is tending to fall apart and transform into a different hexagram with different archetypal meanings. But the meaning of that sixth line has to do with over defending or over fortifying or trying to hold on or clutch to something perfect and beautiful too tight with too much concern for downfall or loss. It's like if you were to have that garden and all the way that you related to it was purely in terms of trying to fortify so that nothing could ever take away the beautiful garden, that it could last forever, that no one could harm it, that it could be yours, right? So when you start operating with a beautiful garden like that, that somehow heaven is imbued with this higher quality, and you start looking at it from the standpoint of possessiveness or scarcity or fear or lack, it's the seed of the undoing of the beautiful thing. Because on earth, it will come to be and it will pass away. That's part of the nature of earth. It can only temporarily reflect the highest beauty before it falls apart. So you can't hold and possess forever. It's a beautiful teaching here that, as I'm writing this report, helps me to understand, okay, so we've got Mercury in Aquarius, Jupiter in Taurus trying to galaxy brain the garden. That's it, right? And we have this sort of warning about the intelligence with which we build the garden, being very sensitive and of a mature, not too hasty, compassionate, sensitive, long term vision. Venus and Saturn have to take their time and be really wise with what they're building right now. There has to be a maturity and an intelligence. Venus Saturn's shadow, right? Venus Saturn's shadow is the fear of loss. It is something, the fear of loss, or the fear of loneliness, or the fear of isolation, or the fear of ruin, or it's that kind of classical sense of wealth and beauty that is exclusive and elitist. It has the sense of uh, being miserly in its possession of beauty, right? It's like, this is mine. It makes me special and nobody else. The Venus Saturn can be like the sort of bougie, status seeking and clutching and grasping. And it can also, it could also, Venus Saturn can also reflect again just that we need to have a long-term view of how we deal with things that will inevitably pass away. Things will not last forever. You can build something beautiful, but you can't try to build it in a way that, like, well, if I just build this beautiful thing, if I reach this goal or realize this desire, then I'll never have to deal with problems again. This is the mature voice of the elder, the high priestess, the Venus Saturn combination with Saturn and Pisces, saying, don't forget, everything dissolves eventually. Okay. So we have a theme with Mercury and Jupiter squaring of building something beautiful, and maybe it's heavenly, but it will fade. It will fall apart eventually. There will be an autumn to this romantic project. And then synthesis. After I take all of that, then I usually write the themes that you usually see on the 5 themes to watch for list. So I hope this was fun today, just taking you into I thought very appropriate, like Mercury, Jupiter. Let me show you the way in which I usually craft, um, you know, craft my list of archetypes to watch for. And so I might have made a list that said something like building something, trying to build heaven on earth. I would have talked about having a long-lasting vision for what you're building that's beautiful but understands impermanence, right? I would have come up with ways of encapsulating it like that. Anyway, I hope this wasn't, I don't know. We'll see. We'll see what you guys think of it. And I'm not going to be doing this every day or anything, but if you guys like this kind of like under the hood, if it helps you learn and if it helps you get to know me a little bit better as an astrologer, then all the better. We will be taking a look at the new moon in Aquarius tomorrow. I hope you guys will enjoy that. Hope you guys are having a nice week. Don't forget to sign up for the upcoming talk on Venus Pluto on the 15th. Head over to the Nightlight Astrology website, click on the live events tab, register. If you can't make it live, you get a recording of it. So hope to see some of you there. All right, take it easy. Bye.
That does not sound like Randall Carlson.
Hey everyone, this is Adam Ellenboss from Nightlight Astrology, and today we're going to take a look at Venus in Capricorn trining Uranus in the sign of Taurus. We're going to take a look at this from the standpoint of 5 different themes to watch for. One of my favorite ways of breaking down any archetypal combination, if you guys are new to the channel, is to look at a list of the different ways in which the planets combine and express themselves on an archetypal level. So we're going to do that today, considering that they are also in a trine and not a square or an opposition, or even a conjunction. The trine is unique. It's of the nature of Jupiter. It's a little smoother and easier, so some slightly different significations than those we might look at in other situations that these find themselves in. But anyway, we'll do that today, and there are some.
Car is such a piece of shit. I can't believe he's even taking that on the track. That car is such a fucking piece of shit. That is another. Like, what are they doing? What are they actually doing? What is this guy even doing? Yo! Aw, thanks, man. Thanks, buddy. You're the man, dude. You're the fucking man. Thanks, man. Appreciate that you saw it, man. Appreciate that comment too. That's really dope, bro. What's up, man? What's up with you? How you doing? You didn't still on the hunt for 23, I'm guessing. Thanks, man. Yeah, I hope I see Big Tommy Man's getting into it too. I think I'm gonna leave it as it is, bro. Sideshow T got a 54. Oh no, the Integra, oh no. It's a $30,000 car now. Wow, thanks a lot, man. That means a lot. Add that as support, honestly. Oh, that Miata. I was wondering, I want to see the suspension, right? Because that's got the double wishbone, that Miata. The driver, it's too rainy. I guess the driver sucks too. Oh no. Oh. Wise. Yeah. Yeah, they're crazy. I would never go in the Nürburgring just because of other people. Are you kidding me? There's no way. There is no way. And if you hit the fences, you gotta pay for it. Like, look how tiny that track is, man. You kidding me? Come on. And it's all friggin' like hilly, like negative and positive and shit. It's not flat. Nightmare. Terrifying. You know what we'll do? We'll watch, we'll search. Good. Okay, this is like nightmare mode. Great driving and drifting Nürburgring. That's if illegal drifting. Illegal. Forbidden? It's illegal to drift? Why? Isn't that safer than what these fucking people are doing? Yeah, look at this. This is way safer. This is way slower. Yeah. Pretty scary in the rain, though. That's fucking terrifying. Wow. That's a nice car, eh? The 1 Series. Holy fuck, look how fast it's going. Those are tires. My car's pretty fat though. It's like 3,700 pounds or something with the iron block. Pretty stiff. It's like it's almost too stiff. Wow. I don't think you're allowed to pass in the corner. I think that was illegal. Come on, man. That was the best drift yet. Oh, that looks like a terrible corner though. What are these cars doing? Like, oh, look at unders here. Nice. Nice. Yeah, dude. That's terrifying, driving a convertible in Nürburgring. Are you serious right now? Nightmare. With somebody? Come on. You can't do that. That's so dangerous. that's like the most dangerous thing you could do. Seizure-inducing headlights. Oh, which one? I missed that one. I missed that. Seizure-inducing headlights. Missed it. That's nightmare mode though. That's not stiff enough. There's no roll cage either. It's raining. Evo, yeah, let's see how it goes. But everyone's taking this corner different, right? This one's going for speed. Yeah. Man, that E36 is so nice, man. Beamer. Man, I had an E46, a 330 Ci, 2003. 330 Ci, 3-liter manual transmission, open diff. I've never owned a limited slip differential car, but so it was amazing street car. But I mean, it wouldn't drift. I mean, you could make it drift, but got it for $6,000 in 2015, 16. But I should have gotten the E36, I think, this one. It would have been less reliable, but it would have been better. 95 Eclipse all-wheel drive? Bro, that's insane. Is that like a hall deck system where it turns on and off like in the Volkswagens? That's crazy, man. That's cool. That's a cool car, man. You still have it? That's an amazing car. all-wheel drive Eclipse 95. Wow, I gotta Google this car. What's been the best? The E36 has been the best that we've seen. Still no like JD. There's not a lot of JDM here. Like RX-7 or yeah. Oh my god, man. I didn't even know it comes in all-wheel drive. That's insane. Bro. That's insane. It's so nice. Nice, man. That's amazing. That's an amazing car, man. The all-wheel drive, that's wild. Yeah, you can definitely do this, the RX-8. The M3. No, the Beamer is too expensive, man. Repairs and shit. And parts. Ad brake. Sorry, man. This isn't like, these aren't the best drifts because this is just a random corner.
I'm giving you that because I think it's one of the best battles I've ever watched. This could be anything. Anything could happen here. You cannot take your eyes off it. Dean and Borkowski back at it again. And Borkowski back where he was the first time. All over James Dean's car. He is actually side by side. Front wheel to front wheels. He's pushing Dean around the track. And the transition is insane. The transition doesn't even make sense. How did he get away with that? And he's still in it. Borkowski dives onto Dean's door. door again. Here we go again. He is hungry for it. This kid wants his name on everyone's lips tonight, and by midnight he might just be that rising star. As he all over the back of James Dean's car, he's right there. He's closer
they're
than he
both
was
just
the first
drifting.
time. He's more aggressive
Like they're
than
not
he was
racing.
the first time. And
This is like
now
wrestling.
he's right with Dean.
It's
He
like
lost
watching
him here
wrestling.
last time. Not this time. James cannot get away, and Borkowski goes right to the door. Does he make a big impact with the wall? How does he hold it? It doesn't make sense.
Look how many tyre marks are on that door. Borkowski just said to him, hey, buddy, what you got? Well, off the line. I'm not going to count Dean out the fight yet because I know that he potentially has got this. He wants this, Dave. He's got a championship in the balance. Borkowski's the wild card, and Dean makes the dive up into the back end of that S14, and he knows where Borkowski was. Borkowski left foot breaks into it. Can he keep with him? Dean not got the
Anyways, I was saying,
wow! Dean almost takes the front of his car off on the back end of Borkowski's S14. Now he starts putting marks on the side of Borkowski's car.
yeah,
Borkowski says,
BMW,
"I'm
it's
not
just
worried about you, dude."
20 miles. I got it at 200,000 kilometers.
Borkowski keeps in it, that perfect lead
I drove it to
line. They
270.
made the way into the roundabout. James Dean not as close as what Borkowski was.
Oh wow,
Transition
insane.
back now. Borkowski looks at the wall, takes a glance down the track, and James Dean right with him, all over the side of that car. Another dangerous
That's
transition
cool, bro.
from James Dean.
Dean now back on the rear quarter of Borkowski.
I saw you're in Portland, right? That's amazing. That's awesome, man. I've never been to Portland. I've been to Seattle. I've been to San Francisco, but I've never been to Portland. I would like to go. Yeah, wide body. You can get that with just wheels and spacers even. Even just wheels you can get that. That's so sick. It was really like almost nearly redlining here. Does that have a limiter? Might have a limiter. That's crazy, man. Nice.
So you are what you are in this world. That's either one or two things.
Is that the airbox? It's such a nice car. Oh my God. That does look retarded though. Like, why don't they just get it through like a radiator front? Whatever. It looks really bad. damn rock chips, eh? The damn rock chips. What are you gonna do about it? Crazy. I wonder if they stance it for it helps with the front turn, especially on the downhill. That's cool, man. Oh wow, insane.
Alright guys, we're currently in
Are they just driving though?
good now.
Holy shit, they're really driving. That's terrifying. That's so fucking dangerous.
MC, let me roll my window. Okay, now we're good. The thing holding on? Yeah, it is.
Oh my god, this engine, man.
I have him in these streets for sure.
Oh my god, the sound in this video is
I
insane.
don't think so.
Got a sailor?
Well, I think my gearbox is grinding a little bit. It's okay though.
DC Drift Champ. Like DK in Japan. DC.
Shit. There's a corners. It's gonna lose me.
That car has like an 8500 red line or something stupid. Like something ridiculous.
Shit, he's apexing the,
What is it? I'm curious now.
apexing the turns a lot better than me.
Oh, wait, I'll search my phone.
It's about a 911 turbo, bro. No,
That's so dangerous,
it's
man.
fine. You know, he's just enjoying the ride. That's okay.
What is it? This is an FD?
We came up with half a tank, and we're at like 3/8 of a tank right now. I have the heater on. Actually, I need the heater on so I don't overheat. So, free, is the thing still on? Yeah, it is.
Jesus Christ.
Shit. Woo. I need some new wheels.
Maybe it just looks faster, because it looks like that truck was flying by, but maybe it wasn't. Maybe it's just a fisheye view.
Well, the car's getting a little hot, I think. At least I am. I'm getting very hot. I'm literally baking in the heat from my engine. You know, cooling and shit. Getting slower because we're not hitting full boost right now.
Yeah, really.
EGTs are a little high. We're heat soaking a lot, and the turns are getting a little tighter. So
Oh, I got a great Camaro SS video we can watch after. In the mountains of California.
Yeah, we're not hitting full boost right now. We're only hitting like 9 pounds.
He's talking over it. He's talking about the Camaro, but it's still a great video.
Nice.
Yeah.
Ooh. I like sweating.
For
Going, like,
for a rotary though,
man, I should need a V-mount. This intercooler
I think
sucks,
that'd be
man.
pretty expected.
I'm gonna take it slow now because we already did the
For
uphill.
the Wankel
And,
rotary
sweating balls
engine.
right now. Frankly.
I was looking it up. I was watching
it's really
rebuild
hot,
videos
man.
of it the other day. Can you believe it?
Yeah.
I know how to.
You know,
Oh, I know in theory
gotta
how
go
to
walk
rebuild a
beneath it.
rotary engine.
whatever
Sweet
happens.
points.
It's what good tread wear and
The
tires
apex
and whatever
seals, the
does.
bolts.
Faster. A little embarrassed because I have almost double his horsepower. I also have almost double his wheel horsepower. Yet he obliterated me. Didn't obliterate me, but I was struggling to keep up on the uphill.
How happy
so
he is. Such a happy
clearly,
guy.
I need some work as a driver myself, but it was all for good fun. You know, I think we had a fun time. He had a fun time. I'm sweating bullets right now. You guys see my pits right now. They're cooking right now. So I'm not, I gotta let the car cool down because when we park up at skid, I can't have the turbo glowing red on me and turn it off. That's very bad. You want to let the oil circulate, cool.
1 LE, is that it? Yeah, this is the one.
Welcome back to the Hot 1LE channel, guys. You guys have excellent taste in YouTube videos, so if you want to like and subscribe, that's cool. If you don't want to do that, it doesn't really matter. The world's gonna end. So hey, let's do this.
I'm gonna blow the vape
Today I
again.
want to talk about some things you're gonna want to do before you drive that
You're
car
back.
off the lot, and this is gonna be some car buying tips, but it's also gonna be some specific tips. Making sure your car actually doesn't just fall apart right out the showroom. And so I'm going to start off with just some car buying tips when it comes to Chevy dealers. Get your own loans. Your dealer can give you a little bit better interest rate or something like that, but they have little gotchas in situations that you aren't going to have if you went through like a normal loan kind of situation. Like, I couldn't pay extra on my car. I had to write them a check and mail it by hand, and they wouldn't take a digital, no, nothing like that. You couldn't digitally send a check. It had to be a handwritten check. California Coast Credit Union Bank, that's how they agreed with their terms with my Chevy dealer. They didn't tell me that. They just said, yeah, you can pay more whenever you like. But just find a good credit union or just a bank that you could submit some quotes on online and, get yourself something that works for you. So moving on from that general, the next thing is accessory buying. So a lot of people go on the website and they see these cool accessories, knee pads, rockers, embroidered armrests. The dash can have a carbon fiber insert. The list goes on. Some of these items are actually installed by the dealer, and that means that your car comes in from the factory with the normal parts, they take them off and then put in these accessories. So at this point, you're actually paying, when you buy that car with that, the dealer installs them, you're going to be paying interest over 6 years on that extra $3, $4, $5, $1,000, whatever it is. This is my advice to you. If you can't easily bolt it on yourself, such as a stereo, red seat belts, interior lighting, then get it from the factory. Get it from the factory. But if you can put it in yourself, and especially easy, these are generally visual things, right? Rockers, splash guards. The list kind of goes on and on. Front lips, rear lips, things like that. Buy the parts later. and then go install them yourself. And here's a little trick the dealers do that they don't tell you. Well, if you order these parts, they pop off your stock parts, right? Well, those you're paying for on top of your already parts. But what they won't do is they don't always put them in your trunk, and they don't always tell you about them. You get your car with the red knee pads, and you're stoked because that's what you paid for, right? Well, no, you actually paid for the red ones and the black ones that were originally on the car. Your dealer's supposed to give you those back, and they're supposed to be in the trunk of your car or handed to you or whatever. But if you don't request those parts back, most dealers hold on to these for like 30, 60, 90 days, and if nobody requests them, they resell them. So this is true with like the all-weather floor mats, or just, you know, they'll take out your regular floor mats and they can resell those as new now if they want. That's how it works. So I would say just avoid the whole situation. Buy your accessories later. You can usually find them cheaper anyways. Try to do it yourself. If you just can't do it yourself, find a nice little shop that'll take care of you and do some good work on your car, and they probably won't charge too much. And avoid the dealer. Just avoid the dealer if you can. The more that they touch your car, the worse off you are. I know you think you have a good relationship with your dealer. Just try to avoid the dealer. You'll have a great relationship with a nice shop. So we're going to move on to a little bit more specific things. And this is going to be specific to your 1LEs and ZL1s. And you don't want to be that guy that drives around with these. But we've seen those guys, and they're embarrassed. If you buy a brand new 1LE or a ZL1, when those babies come off the truck, when those sweet, sweet babies come off the truck, they're going to have spring spacers on them. So in your front, underneath your front wheel wells on your springs, there's going to be these yellow or orange, or at one time they were black, spring spacers that kind of space out the springs so it lifts the front end so you don't rip off the lift getting it on and off of the delivery truck when you first get your car. Sometimes dealers forget to leave these guys in. You got like an extra like 2 to 3 inches wheel gap. It'll also ride really weird and stiff and not be right, but if you're not like familiar with these cars or really know what you're looking for, you just buy it because it's cool or
Do you know
whatever.
this video?
You're gonna miss on that. You're not gonna quite know.
It's a famous
It
video from
probably
the
won't cause
past.
any damage to your suspension, but it depends on how long you drive and how much you drive it, because it is changing the spring rate. It's changing the dampening. It's putting a lot of shock on your suspension.
I don't know if it was fake police or real police, but where is it? What? Where is it? YouTube has become shit, and they've hidden so much shit. It makes it impossible to find. Like, you just can't find it. Come on, man. Oh, Porsche. Stockholm Porsche. Yes. A remaster? Come on. You can't be serious. Someone 4K remastered this? Come on. This is not real life. Oh my god, they actually did. Do you guys... Does anyone... It's okay, you can lurk. But it's a famous video. See, like, it could be fake. This doesn't look like a real police car. And, like, they don't look like real police officers. But it's like, it doesn't matter, because check this out. Holy fuck, man. On the cobblestone? Oh no. Insane, bro. Look at this footage. That's not right. Oh wow, really? Is that true? I don't know anything about the dynastic Egyptians, the dynasties. That's not right. Why does it so confidently give wrong information? Is it maybe 3.6 to 1? 3.61? Like, this is wrong. It's like, it doesn't make any sense. Yo, what up, Healthy? It's going well, man. I haven't started yet. I've just been watching. What, it's been an hour and a half? I haven't lifted a single weight yet. So, reason why I bring up the RSX, because this is, man, my RSX had a K20A3 engine. Man. And it sounded like this a little bit. It sounded a lot like this engine. I don't know what this engine is. I think this is the... Man. That RSX would fucking fly, man. It would just go. It was insane. Tall gears also. RSX was insane at speeds above 100 kilometers per hour. That's when it really got insane. That thing was insane. Don't drive fast, kids. So scary. That's terrifying.
tunnel comes good. Everyone's out of it. I think, what is it? That's just so like that. Yep.
Such a big
That is
car.
so much fun. I don't know if it looks
Huge
as fun
car.
on camera as it does in person, but man.
Just looks and feels big. I love the Mustang, but the new ones just feel huge. Oh, I think it's the hood. Like the rounded hood that makes it look huge. I don't know. I'd be pretty scared to rip it in this. I mean, I drove a 2013 GT. I rented one for 2 weeks. Put 3,000 kilometers on it. But it felt just smaller, I would say. Same dimensions. This car is amazing. Fourth gear at 100 kilometers per hour. Pretty standard. That engine's so amazing.
Jeez. Oh my goodness. Incredible. Alrighty guys, so that was our little quick canyon run. It's a lot of fun actually, a lot more fun than I remember because I haven't been on the canyon since I got the Corsa and my new shifter, so feels really good. Next step is definitely to get some suspension work done. I think suspension work is going to do this car wonders.
Appearance, let's do the track. Let's go back. Sport mode with the track style gauge setup. Let's go. Can't drive too fast. There's a lot of people here on a Saturday. Look at this. Definitely coming back here on a weekday so we can catch some speed, but I at least wanted to give you guys an idea of what this new gauge cluster looks like. Kind of enjoy it and go for a drive since there's not much to do out there right
I think it's the best sound too. I love the sound of the Coyote. It sounds amazing. I think it's the message. I think it's the best car.
Good time. Make sure you guys check out the playlist on the screen, maybe the video. Hit that subscribe button if you guys like building comments in the garage, learning everything you can about each specific sports car model, from before buying it to after getting it, DIY modifying it in the garage yourself. That's what the Karma Speed brand on the channel is all about. Look out for that merch drop in the beginning of June. I got some exciting stuff on the way officially. I've paid for it, it's coming, and we're going even bigger this time. See ya.
No, that is a happy man. It's terrifying driving a convertible. That's the most terrifying thing. I'm just scared watching this. This is from Moonraker.
Alright, hopefully I find a nice little spot where I'm all alone, because that was a little slow, but there are some tight turns. I'm not going for a track record here. There are some tight ones, so you gotta be prepared for those. I'm just gonna shut up and drive so that way you guys can enjoy it. On a truck here, probably gonna have to cool it a little bit. He's getting it pretty good actually, but I'm gonna give him a little space. All right, I can't see the truck anymore, so we'll get back onto it.
and see. All right, we're good to go. Coming back in on them, I'll give them some room here. That's another part of being into cars. It's not just building them and making them your own, but also getting out there and enjoying them, because that's what cars are meant for. They're meant to be driven and put miles on them, enjoy them. The motor is meant to be on, the motor's meant to rip. That's why it's designed. Just go out there and drive. And up here I really like that's pretty tight. Avoid the raccoon in the middle of the road, that's killed. But that one, I think I can roll down the windows and it kind of echo a little bit with the exhaust. It's definitely got some tight turns, so you gotta be on your toes.
Sorry guys, you know what we're gonna watch again? We're gonna watch the Graham Hancock, Michael Shermer again, I swear to God. I'm sorry guys, but it's that good. Like, I love that. It just gets my heart racing whenever I see that one.
Three, two. This is live, ladies and gentlemen, and this is a very unusual podcast we're going to have here, and a very unusual discussion. I have to my left Michael Shermer, very famous skeptic. He's been on the podcast before. Of course, Randall Carlson, amazing gentleman who knows far too much about terrifying things like asteroids. And Graham Hancock, author, also fantastic human being, many times been on this podcast as well. And this all came out of a podcast that Randall and Graham and I did recently, and Michael Shermer commented on it, and it was all essentially on the hypothesis that the great extinction that happened with the North American land animals that happened somewhere around the end of the Ice Age, and the end of the Ice Age, the abrupt end of the Ice Age, being caused, please correct me if I fuck any of this up, being caused by a comet impact. Michael Shermer had some questions about that, and we said this would be an amazing podcast to get everybody together in a room and go over this. Since then, there's been some interesting stuff that's happened. Well, I thought this was really fascinating that Forbes has a mainstream article in Forbes, did a comet wipe out Ice Age megafauna? And this is actually from just a couple of weeks ago. And then there was also this interpretation that's fairly recent as well about one of the stone tablets, one of the stone carvings, rather, on Göbekli Tepe. And Graham, you would probably be the best to describe that.
Yeah, that was published in Mediterranean Archaeology and Archaeometry, peer-reviewed journal, by a couple of scientists from the University of Edinburgh. And they are proposing an interpretation of the Göbekli Tepe imagery. There's quite a lot of imagery on those T-shaped pillars, particularly one pillar, pillar 43 in enclosure D. And their deduction, what they take from their interpretation, of course many will disagree with them, their interpretation is that those images are speaking of the comet impact. They're speaking of a comet that hit the Earth roughly 12,900 years before our time.
And Randall, this has been something that you've been obsessed with for many, many years now. We've documented it and detailed it in many conversations that we've had on the podcast.
Yes. Now, I can't say that I'm that familiar with that article. I haven't had a chance to get into it. So
but this idea that the comet impact is what has caused the end of the Ice Age.
Well, it's so complex, but now what we do is we throw some type of an impact into the mix, and it seems to fill gaps
pull this right up to you.
It seems to fill gaps that were, at this point, still unexplained. There's varying theories between some extent of climate change and some extent of human predation that caused the extinction. And I've always felt like, you can't blame it on one or the other. I think humans probably had a role, but only in the very final stages of the extinction event. And one of the scenarios would certainly suggest that there were extreme climate changes between what's called the Balling Alarod, which was the rather gradual warming at the very end of the Pleistocene, which was then followed by the Younger Dryas, which was the return to full glacial cold, and then the end of the Younger Dryas, which is dated at about 11,600, which is considered now to be the boundary of the Holocene. Post Younger Dryas, pre-boreal it's called, would be the beginning of the Holocene. And it seems that most of the extinctions did occur between roughly 13,000 and 11,600 years ago, although the dating has a wide spread on it, so you can't pinpoint it down to a specific event. But I've always felt like that there had to be something we needed to look at that triggered the extreme climate changes that we do see at the end of the Ice Age. And to my opinion, you can't attribute that solely to Milankovitch theories, which is basically the changing solar terrestrial geometries, because they're too slow. And what we see at the end of the Ice Age were very rapid climate changes. And so one of the things that I think has been missing has been the trigger. Wallace Brecker pointed out years ago that possibly a major flood from the draining of Lake Agassiz caused an interruption of the thermohaline circulation, which is basically the circulation of the North Atlantic Ocean, and that this might have been what triggered the Younger Dryas and then also contributed to the mass extinction events. But now I think that the dating of the draining of Lake Agassiz is too late for that, and was probably a latter event within the overall melting phenomena that occurred between roughly 14,600 and about 11,000 years ago. Somewhere in there we have to fit that mass extinction event, and I definitely have thought that climate change was the dominant factor in that. But then what triggered the climate change? That always seemed to me to be something that was not ever really explained. The comet impact theory is very controversial, but the evidence has been steadily mounting now for a decade.
Including physical evidence, right? Like the core samples that show nuclear glass scattered out throughout Asia and Europe at roughly the same time period when they do the core samples?
Yes, most of it's dating to 12,800 to 13,000 years ago.
These are called impact proxies.
Yeah. Impact proxies.
Nanodiamonds, melt glass, microspherules. These kind of things are associated with impact, not necessarily always caused by impact. So this has been part of the reason for the controversy, but it's the abundance of all of these at a particular level which leads a large group of scientists to feel that we have had a comet impact in the past.
It's the full assemblage of things that is difficult to explain by processes without invoking some type of a cosmic event.
And it also corresponds with what you believe is a period where Earth travels through a series of comets.
Well, this gets us to the ideas of what would be called the British neo-catastrophists, Victor Klube and William Napier and a number of others that have theorized that from time to time Earth encounters the debris from a large disintegrating comet. And there's an interesting William Napier addresses this in an interesting article I can pull up here pretty soon, that possibly around 13,000 years ago, Earth may have encountered some of the debris from a disintegrating comet, which ultimately goes back to Fred Whipple, who is one of the godfathers of cometary science.
Could I just come in on that for a second? Yeah. I mean, specifically, Bill Napier, Victor Klube are identifying the remnants of this comet with the Taurid meteor stream, which is familiar, I think, to everybody. We pass through it twice a year. We see meteorites, particularly at the end of October, early November. That debris stream is still there. It still contains, according to their argument, bits of the comet. There are large objects in it, like Comet Encke, Rudnicki, Olgiato, and so on, 4 or 5 kilometers in diameter. And the suggestion is that the meteor stream, it's got lots of small bits of dust, but it's got some larger stuff too, and some of that stuff fell out of the meteor stream 12,800 years ago and impacted primarily the North American ice cap.
Now, Michael, when you listened to that podcast, you had some questions. You are a professional skeptic, so of course you were skeptical. What are your thoughts about all this?
Yeah, let me pull back and give a bigger picture. After the podcast, I went and got the book, Magicians of the Gods, and actually I listened to it on audio, so it's, I don't know, like 16, 18 hours of Graham reading with his wonderful British accent, which, as you know, for Americans, that elevates the quality of the argument by an order of magnitude.
Yeah, that's how they sell things in infomercials over here.
And Graham, you're a good writer. It's a very compelling story.
Thank you. You're a great skeptic.
And you know, and so I think, you know, a number of points about, in general, the idea of alternative archaeology, which is really what we're talking about here. I prefer that to pseudo-archaeology, because that's a little bit of it's supposed to be a little bit of an insult. So alternative archaeology, so it's good to remember that, so you have these guys on the podcast for 3 or 4 hours, and the audience listening thinks, yeah, why don't these guys get a fair hearing? I mean, it's like there's the mainstream and then there's these guys.
Right.
But there isn't just these guys. There's hundreds of alternative archaeological theories. So which one gets the play, which one gets attention, which one doesn't? And for a mainstream archaeologist who's busy in the field and trying to get grants and so on, they mostly just don't have the time to sort through all these alternative theories, because this is just one. And as we'll see in the next couple hours, there's hundreds and hundreds of things to be addressed. So that's kind of what we do. So just to rattle off a few: the lost tribes of Israel who colonized the Americas, Mormon archaeology, explanation of Native Americans, the Kensington rune stones in Minnesota that the Vikings had come here, the Black Egyptian hypothesis. When I was in graduate school, this book called Black Athena was published, that the Egyptians were actually black, and that the, you know, sort of Western white male dominance of history had written them out of the past. So, you know, this was a whole alternative history, alternative archaeology. Piltdown Man, Thor Heyerdahl, and his hypothesis that the Polynesian islands were colonized by South Americans who went east to west. That's since been debunked, but that's yet another one of these things. South American archaeology, Olmec statues seem to have like African features on them, so maybe Africans went directly across to South America. So there's, you know, Eric Van Doniken, Zechariah Sitchin. Now, most of these Graham rejects in his book, to your credit. So you're a good skeptic too. But for an outsider, to an anthropologist from Mars who steps into this thing cold, doesn't know anything, it's like, well, they're all alternative. Which is the right one, and how do we know? And so what the way it works in science is, you know, the default position is the skeptical position. We assume your hypothesis is not true, not just you, anybody's hypothesis, like the Klug-Napier hypothesis. That was widely published. It was widely covered in mainstream scientific journals and popular science magazines like Scientific American, and it has not fared that well over the last decade or so. It's still around. It's still debated, but so you put it in the mainstream through peer-reviewed journals, and then you go to conferences and you have it out, and that's kind of where we end up with, well, this is what we think is probably true for now, and then all these other people out here, if they don't jump into the pool where everybody is, then there's no way for an outsider to know whether these alternative things have any validity or not, other than they make a compelling case in a popular book, yes, but what do the mainstream scientists think? So, and the problem is that, so a couple of specific things, like what I call patternicity, the tendency to find meaningful patterns in random noise, you know, the Virgin Mary on a grilled cheese sandwich or whatever. Mm-hmm. Those are fun examples, but, you know, taking pictographs, pectoglyphs, and then comparing them to constellations, like, you know, here we have some constellations on your roof here. It's easy in the mind's eye to find a pattern. The question is, did those people really think 10,000 years ago, 5,000 years? So this is a field called archaeoastronomy. Ed Krupp, the director of the Griffith Observatory here in LA, this is what he does. And sometimes he thinks the patterns mean something. Sometimes they're totally random. Or you take something like the pyramids, you know, as Graham knows, there's, you know, 100 theories about the pyramids. And there's the mainstream one, and then there's all these other ones. And this is why people like the director there, you know, he just can't deal with them all, you know. So just as one example I used in my book, White People Believe Weird Things, that, you know, one guy calculated that if you divide the height of the pyramid into twice the side of the base, you get the number close to pi. And then he just sort of works all these different numbers, so therefore it's cosmically significant.
Well, Richard Hoagland was like the best example of that,
Yes,
right? He would
Hoagland.
find these patterns in Mars and claim that like if you go from this rock to half the distance and like why would you do that? Like that doesn't make any sense. He would create these patterns.
Right, and that's okay. I mean, all scientists look for patterns. So, like, just take climate change. Either the Earth is getting warmer, it's not. Either it's human caused or it's not. There's a pattern in the data. You can see the pattern. The question is the pattern real? So this is why we use the term climate consensus. It's not a democracy. It's not like we voted on it and decided this is the truth. It's that independently, all these different scientists working in different fields, publishing in different journals, come to the same conclusion. So we call this consilient science or convergence of evidence science. That it's not like these guys are meeting on the weekends going, boy, we got to combat those, those crazy right-wingers with our data. They're independently coming to these conclusions. So that lifts our confidence that, yeah, there's probably something to their theory. Such that there's now so much data converting to this, you'd have to deconstruct every one of those independent lines. So then you have things like what I call the problem of the residue of anomalies. In any field, there are a residue of anomalies we can't explain. So like UFOs, for example. Ufologists, and me, a skeptic, agree that 90 to 95% of all the UFO sightings are explained by natural phenomena. Venus, swamp gas, airplanes, geese, whatever. They know that. And so we're really only talking about 5%. Like, how do you explain that one right there in 1967 on June 3rd? I don't know. No one knows that one. And then from there they build, well, that's my case. Then if you can't explain that, then I have a case. No.
Well, that's very different than what we're talking about here.
Yeah,
though, right?
how is that relevant to us here?
It's totally relevant because I think almost all of your argument is based on this residue of anomalies, what we call the God of the gaps argument. If you scientists can't explain, this particular rock right here or that particular petroglyph, then I'm going to count that toward my compilation of data to support my hypothesis of a lost civilization.
But no one is saying that the scientists can't explain it. What essentially, particularly Randall with this series of images has shown, is that what you have here is something that can be explained by rapid melting of the ice caps. And Randall, step in if you will.
Well,
okay, go ahead if you want.
Well, they do say, I mean, it depends what you mean by rapid. A glacial dam that, as our geologists will tell us in a moment, that breaks, that's fairly rapid. Back in '96, there was a very popular book called The Noah's Flood. This was a serious book by two geologists that said it was the rapid filling up of the Black Sea that swamped over the civilizations living on the edges of this, and that's where the Noachian flood story comes from. Okay, so it was widely debated and so on, and since it hasn't fared that well. But that's fairly rapid. I mean, we're talking over the course of weeks or months or years. To a geologist, thousands of years is rapid. So, an impact by a comet, it happens in a couple hours or a couple of days or weeks versus a couple of months or years. What do we mean by rapid?
Okay, well, what are you saying then?
Okay.
So what are you saying about their theories in particular?
Okay, so the problem, I think, Graham, the deepest problem is much of your theory depends on negative evidence. That is, I don't accept the mainstream explanation for the pyramids, the Sphinx, the Machu Picchu, whatever.
Well, let's not talk about that. Let's just talk about this specific subject because it's going to take a long time just to cover
okay, all right. So I'll
asteroidal
just hit
impacts.
all right. So my final point is the falsifiability one. That is, what would it take to refute your hypothesis? Like, for me, the answer would be, like, if Göbekli Tepe turned out to be what you think it might have been, the place where advanced ancient civilization once inhabited or they used it. Where are the metal tools? Where are the writing, the examples of writing?
Perhaps a decision was made not to use metal. Perhaps a decision was made that errors had taken place, that in reinventing civilization we shouldn't perhaps go down quite the same route as before. Perhaps writing isn't always an advance. Perhaps an oral tradition which records in memory, which enhances and uses the power of memory, may be a very effective way of dealing with information. We regard writing as an advance, and I can see lots of reasons why it is an advance, but if we put ourselves into the heads of ancient peoples, maybe it wasn't. I mean, there's a tradition from ancient Egypt that the god Thoth, god of wisdom, was the inventor of writing. But we have a text in which he is questioned by a pharaoh who is saying, well, actually, have you really done a good thing by introducing writing? Because then the words may roam around the world without wise advice to put them into context. And what will happen to memory when people? So there might be a choice not to go that way.
All right, but then what do you mean by advanced? When you say there used to be a lost advanced civilization before 10,000 years ago.
Well, let's just pause here for a second, because what we know for a fact is that the carbon dating in all the area around Göbekli Tepe is somewhere around 12,000 years. Is that correct?
11,600 years ago is
so
the earliest they found so far. But a great deal of Göbekli Tepe is still underground.
Right. So at least what we know is someone built some pretty impressive structures 11,600 years ago.
7,000 years before Stonehenge.
So when that story broke, this is long before you came along with your book, it was controversial in the sense that we thought hunter-gatherers could not do something like this because to do that you need a large population with a division of labor and so forth. And so what the response to archaeologists was, well, I guess we were wrong about hunter-gatherers. Maybe they can do more stuff than we gave them credit for. So why is that not a reasonable hypothesis versus it was actually advanced, but we mean something completely different by advanced, not writing and metal and technology. We mean, I don't know what you mean. What do you mean?
Well, I mean, we have a body of archaeology which goes on for decades, which is saying that megalithic sites, for example, Gigantea in Malta or Hagarim or Menidra, megalithic sites date to no older than 5,500 to 6,000 years old. Gigantea would push it close to 6,000 years old. And there are no older sites than that, and therefore the megalithic site is associated with a certain stage of Neolithic development. Then along comes Göbekli Tepe, 7,000 years older than Stonehenge. Incredibly sophisticated site, very large scale. I mean, Klaus Schmidt, sadly, he's passed away. I spent 3 days working the site with him. He was very generous to me. He showed me a lot. He talked to me a lot. And he said basically 50 times as much as they've already excavated is still under the ground, that there's hundreds and hundreds of giant stone pillars that they've identified with ground-penetrating radar. He's not even sure if they're ever going to excavate them. But by all accounts, we are looking, if we take what's still under the ground into account, we're looking at the largest megalithic site that's ever been created on Earth. And it pops up 11,600 years ago with no obvious background to it. It just comes out of nowhere. Now, to me, that's rather that we know of. But to me, that's immediately a rather puzzling and an interesting situation. And I would be remiss as an author and an inquirer into these matters if I didn't take great interest in that. The sudden appearance, 7,000 years before Stonehenge, of a megalithic site that dwarfs Stonehenge, to me, that's a mystery, and it's really worth inquiring into.
To put it into perspective, that's more than 2,000 years older than what we now consider to be the building of the Great Pyramid of Giza in comparison to us to then. So between our time now in 2017 and the construction of the Great Pyramid, you're talking about 2,000 years earlier than that. I mean, that is unbelievable when you're talking about 7,000 years before what we thought people were doing.
Okay, but my point was that instead of, before we go down the road of constructing a lost civilization that was super advanced but different from our idea of advanced, why not just attribute to these fully modern hunter-gatherers who had the same size brains we have and so on, that they were able to figure out and do this? We just underestimated their abilities.
But why did archaeologists tell us for so long hunter-gatherers couldn't do it, and we needed agricultural populations that could generate surpluses that could pay for the specialists
that was the theory. But that was so now what archaeologists are saying was, I guess we were wrong about hunter-gatherers.
Well, they might be wrong about hunter-gatherers, or there might be another civilization that they had not discovered that has been unearthed by time.
Okay, but
sorry, Michael, lost civilizations are not such an extraordinary idea. I mean, nobody knew that the Indus Valley civilization existed at all until some railway work was done around Mohenjo-Daro in 1923. Suddenly, a whole civilization pops up out of the woodwork that's just never been taken into account before the 1920s. We still can't read its script. You know, the idea that we come across that another turn of the spade reveals information that causes us to reconsider not just was it hunter-gatherers or agriculturalists, but perhaps something bigger than this is involved.
Or in between that.
That's not such an extraordinary idea. I get it that mainstream archaeology doesn't want to go there, but that's my job to go there.
I don't think that's correct. They would be happy to go there if there's evidence for it. By what you just said, they now fully accept the Indus Valley civilizations. How did that happen if they were dogmatically closed-minded?
I don't say that they were dogmatically closed-minded about that. The evidence, the massive amount of evidence that came up with the discovery of Mohenjo-Daro, Harappa, Dholavira, and other such sites, it's very difficult. You have to be completely stupid to say that that's not a civilization. Göbekli Tepe is a bit more nuanced. You know, we have stone circles. We have some interesting astronomical alignments. The world's first perfectly north-south aligned building.
Maybe.
No, definitely.
Again, that's a patternicity thing.
Well, I'm citing Klaus Schmidt.
Well, that's all right. But any of us who read back into history 10,000 years ago, what we're thinking that they might have been thinking, that's always dangerous for anybody, not just you, all of us.
That's a good point. Who is Klaus Schmidt?
Klaus Schmidt was the original excavator of Göbekli Tepe. He was the head of the German Archaeological Institute, DIG, at Göbekli Tepe. He kindly spent 3 days showing me around the site. And really nobody's disputing the astronomical alignments of Göbekli Tepe. They weren't particularly interesting to Klaus Schmidt, but they're there.
And what is the alignment? Like, how is it established?
Well, when you have a perfectly north-south aligned structure, perfectly north-south, to true north, not magnetic north, then you are dealing with astronomy by definition. And there are other alignments of the stone circles.
True north as established today, or with the precession of the equinoxes?
True north is always
about
true
12.
north.
Okay.
It's the rotation axis of our planet.
Okay, so to this day, it points exactly in the same place where it was pointing.
It always points to true north.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah.
But back to this, they don't want to go. Sure, they want to go there. They would be happy to go there. Case in point, 2 weeks ago in the journal Nature, the most prestigious scientific journal in the world, there was published an article that humans or maybe Neanderthals lived in San Diego area 130,000 years ago. This is an order of magnitude older than the Clovis dates.
This was the mastodon bones they found that were
mastodon
smashed.
Bones, yes.
They believe.
So here's an example of how, clearly there's not some conspiracy to keep alternative people or fringe or radical theories out. It was published in peer-reviewed, the most prestigious journal in the world. There it is. 2
And
weeks
then
ago.
what happened?
Well,
hasn't there been a massive reaction to that, and lots of scathing remarks by other academics?
Yes, but that's normal. That's how
Yes.
science works.
Yeah.
You get pushed back. You got to have a thick skin. It's just the way it goes.
You got to have a thick skin. That's for sure. But maybe sometimes your skin is so thick that you just can't sense anything around
Well,
you.
of course, we don't want that either.
So what do you think is going on when you look at something like Göbekli Tepe that's covered up purposefully, right?
Yes,
12,000 years
deliberately
ago?
buried. Again, I cite Klaus Schmidt. He's the authority on this. He's the excavator. He absolutely adamantly insists that site was deliberately buried and finally covered with a hill, which is what Göbekli Tepe means in the Turkish language, pot-bellied hill.
Yeah.
And you're talking about something. Give me the perspective of how large they believe it is currently, as of current.
What's excavated at the moment is on a scale of Stonehenge. What's under the ground may be as much as 50 times larger.
Jesus.
But at Göbekli Tepe, no one lived there. There's no tools. There's no.
Well, you're talking about 12,000 years old, though.
But if it's buried, there should be pottery. There's no pottery, no writing, no articles of clothing. No one lived there.
Well, you're saying nobody lived there, so why should they have pottery? Why should pottery be in the fill?
Why
would they go along and break some pots and stick it in the artificial
but how
fill?
about something? They're trash something that would indicate it's a different kind of people than what we're used to seeing in the archaeological record.
Well,
in other words,
it's just rubbish that they poured in. It's just stones and earth, buckets of it.
In other words, Graham, for you to gain support for your theory amongst mainstream archaeologists, they want to see positive evidence to overturn the old theory. In other words, the burden of proof is on the person challenging the mainstream.
I completely agree.
In every field.
But isn't there some proof that the mainstream idea of these hunters and gatherers never had anything in what the theory was that would indicate these people were capable of building something even remotely the size of Göbekli Tepe?
Yeah, to me, that's the stunning beauty of this find. It overturns our ideas of primitive hunter-gatherers that could not do this. Apparently, they can.
That's one possible assessment.
That's right. So I call this, somebody else calls it, the bigotry of low expectations. It's like we had this kind of low expectations for these hunter-gatherers. Maybe we should jettison that idea. And in my own other field of the history of religion, it also threw that off because this apparently was a kind of a spiritual religious. That's the wrong word. They wouldn't have used.
Actually,
nobody
nobody can know that.
That's right. So, but if it was, this is the big National Geographic article emphasized that maybe this is the very first religious spiritual temple ever built because they didn't live there, so they went there for a reason.
Isn't it also possible that this is signs that civilization was more advanced 12,000 years ago than we thought?
Okay, more advanced. What do we mean by
We're
advanced?
talking about the ability to construct an amazing structure.
Well, okay.
How big was it? Like, how tall are these stone?
Some of them are 20 feet tall.
Yeah, but
some of them are smaller with astronomical alignments. Klaus Schmidt called it a center of innovation. He was intrigued by the way that agriculture emerges around Göbekli Tepe at the same time that Göbekli Tepe is created. I mean, he went on record with me, perhaps he's not right, but he went on record with me as saying that was the first agriculture. These were the people who invented agriculture. Now, to me, the notion that a group of hunter-gatherers wake up one morning and invent megalithic architecture, the world's largest megalithic site, and at the same moment invent agriculture, stretches credulity a bit. And I think I would prefer to propose, and I have proposed, that what we're looking at is evidence of some kind of transfer of technology, that people came into that area who had other knowledge, and that was applied, and perhaps they mobilized the local population around this site. Perhaps that's precisely why we see agriculture developing there. So perhaps that's the skill that's being passed on.
But I don't see anything particularly. Okay, the stone work is spectacular, but that's not any more advanced than a few millennium afterwards.
But you're talking about something 20 feet tall, made of stone,
but we know
by people that were hunter-gatherers?
But a couple hundred people can move multi-ton stones.
There's no mystery in moving the stones. They're still moving 20-ton stones in Indonesia today. I mean, megalithic cultures still exist.
You also know that the carving on the outside is extremely complex. It's three-dimensional carving.
Okay, but I mean,
but you know that means.
But
do you know what that means?
But Lascaux at 30,000 years ago has magnificent cave paintings with three-dimensional animals.
But that's painting. You know that they. You know, hold on a second. Yeah. Do you know what I'm saying when I say three-dimensional carvings?
Yeah, like the Venus.
No,
Milo.
the carvings were on the outside, meaning they didn't carve them into the rock. They carved away the rock around them, which is pretty sophisticated stuff for hunter-gatherers. And they're doing this on these 20-foot tall stone columns. I mean, it's pretty impressive stuff.
Okay, but there the assumption is that they couldn't have figured this out. We know from modern societies where, say, Australian Aborigines, in one generation, they go from stone tools to flying airplanes. The brains are quite capable of doing these amazing things.
Did they go from stone tools to flying airplanes without somebody introducing them to airplanes?
Yeah, you're actually making his argument for him.
No. It's not that much of a reach to carve stone. People have been carving stones for thousands of years.
But the entire archaeological opinion on megalithic sites for decades before this was precisely that it was beyond their ability to do that.
And now the mainstream has changed its mind about this. Or at the very least,
a little shift.
Let's pause for a moment. Let's pause for a moment. So, for sure, we all agree human beings made this.
Yes, not aliens.
Okay.
Even
so
he rejects the aliens.
So the argument is not whether or not aliens made it. The argument is whether or not humans made it that were sophisticated. Well, they're clearly sophisticated enough to make this incredible structure that is some sign of some sort of civilization. I mean,
I believe so. Yeah.
It is. It's a gigantic structure.
Here I agree with Graham that we've again undersold who these people were. My friend Jared Diamond goes to Papua New Guinea. He talks in the opening chapter of Guns, Germs, and Steel how smart these people are that live out there in nature and what it takes to survive. He wouldn't last an hour. You know, from L.A., he wouldn't last an hour with his Papua New Guinean friends out there in the wild.
Well, that's just because he doesn't know how to survive, and they've been passing down the information for generation after generation.
Very smart. Okay, so it's not it's not a problem of intelligence. And is there? Okay, so here's the other thing we don't know is that there might be lots more of these sites, and where
there are. I visited one of them, Karahan Tepe. You've got the T-shaped pillars sticking out the side of a hill in a farmer's backyard. I mean, I think we're actually at the beginning of opening up this inquiry, not at the end of it by any means.
But then before you, why not just say we don't know? This is a spectacular mystery and leave it at that. Why write a book that says
you guys
I'm going to fill in all the gaps?
You guys on the mainstream side won't speculate and won't explore. I don't claim to be an archaeologist. I'm not a scientist. I'm an author. It's my job to offer an alternative alternative point of view and to offer a coherently argued alternative point of view. And I must say, Göbekli Tepe strikes me as a gigantic fucking mystery, and a mystery that is worthy of exploration from a point of view that may not satisfy you.
Oh well, it does, you don't have to satisfy me.
You and your colleagues, and I certainly don't have to satisfy you or them. That's not my project.
But like your opening chapter with Schmidt, I thought I really loved the kind of conversational style you had with Schmidt in the book, where he's dialoguing, where Schmidt goes and look at this, and then he says, but what? Wait, what's that again? Now he's like a little bit like Columbo. Like, wait, I have just one more question, and the mystery kind of thickens. That's perfectly okay. That's great. I mean, that's what science is all about, is uncovering mysteries that we then have to figure out. So there's always more mysteries, but that doesn't mean, that's not positive evidence in favor of a particular theory like a lost civilization. It's just we can't explain this. Full stop.
Yeah, we certainly can't explain it, and you can't explain it by saying that we underestimated hunter and gatherers either.
Well, why not? We know they made it. Whatever you want to call them.
Well, we know humans made it.
That's right. We know humans made it. So whatever you want to call them.
But why do they believe that people were only hunters and gatherers 12,000 years ago? It's because they didn't have any evidence to the contrary.
Right.
This is evidence to the contrary.
I agree.
So you agree that there weren't hunter and gatherers?
Okay, but there's several stages in between. Just 12 people living out in the jungle by themselves versus us. There's like a whole bunch of different.
Well, I would say that Göbekli Tepe is a gigantic stage.
Well, we don't. Okay, they didn't live there, so we have to figure out where were they living and what was there. So that has to be excavated.
Well, they only excavated 10% of it, right?
And meanwhile, what you're saying is that we shouldn't speculate at all, because mainstream archaeology is speculating.
No,
mainstream archaeology is speculating
okay.
when saying it's definitely was hunter-gatherers who did this. That's also a speculation.
That seems more of a reach.
Okay, but not okay. They may be more than hunter-gatherers. They may have been partially settled. You can have any kind of number of states.
But what you can't apparently have is the possibility of a transfer of technology from people who were really masters of that technology already when they came in.
But where are these people?
Well, you're dealing with an
incredible. Where are their homes?
12,000 years ago, their fingerprints are there. Let's find their homes. I don't know that their homes matter. Would their homes even survive after 12,000 years?
Well, homes.
I'm not sure.
They're trash.
But what
they're
survives?
Tools. They're something.
Well,
Screw trash and tools. We've got Göbekli Tepe. It confronts us. It challenges the mainstream model. I think it's reasonable to consider the possibility that there was something more than just hunter-gatherers involved here in creating this extraordinary place. Okay. And that's all I've done.
It seems to me that to say hunter-gatherers could build this, wouldn't be opposed to the idea that they're hunting and gathering, but it does certainly imply a lot of leisure time.
Yes.
A lot of leisure time.
Well, we know hunter-gatherers. Oh, sorry.
It's okay. It was like...
Well, again, if we place this back, particularly within that climate zone at 11,006 to 12,000, 13,000 years ago, whatever it turns out to be, we're dealing with an extremely demanding and challenging climate, which wouldn't necessarily, to my mind, be conducive to the emergence of a settled culture that would be capable of undertaking a project on this scale. And as somebody who's built a lot of things and moved quite a few heavy weights in my time, I find it the idea sort of perplexing to me that they would be. What I would have to ask is, what is their motive? What is their motive for undertaking a project on this scale? Because it's an enormous project. And to move a 20-ton block of stone is really a challenging task to undertake.
Today,
well, without the infrastructure of large machines and so forth. But to do it by hand, it would be an enormous undertaking. And I, to me, it's like, when are they having time to hunt and gather when they're engaged in a project of this scale?
But we know hunter-gatherers have way more free time than modern society people do. That's the one thing we've learned, is that it's a pretty good way to make a living, actually. They have a better berry diet than we have. This is the Neanderthal diet, right? They have a better berry diet and a lot more free time.
Yeah, but that's
within a lot less stress.
We knew that all along about hunter-gatherers when we were saying they couldn't build megalithic sites.
But we're looking at a time
to do it.
where the environment is undergoing rapid changes, to which adaptations would be extremely challenging. And we know those changes are going on all over the planet. We know that sea levels are rapidly rising over a period of a few thousand years, from a sea stand low of about 400 feet up to the present level. We also know that biotas were shifting dramatically all over the planet. The effects of the Younger Dryas were global. Pretty much that is, I think, the emerging consensus now, that both hemispheres, north and south, were being affected by the climate changes of the Younger Dryas. So what we're doing is we're placing this phenomena, this project, within this context of these extremely challenging times in which, you know, adaptation to the environmental changes could easily be the all-consuming challenge of the times. I'm just finding it difficult to imagine a disconnect, to see this disconnect between a project of this magnitude and the motive for doing it during a time when obviously the environment could be posing serious constraints upon people's ability to function in that.
Well, Randall, we don't even know the motives of the Easter Islanders and
No, we
why
don't.
they raised these huge, but we know they did it.
But isn't that become a central question, though? What something had to have motivated them.
But let's get back to Göbekli Tepe. So let's just be real clear here. We know there were humans. We know that it's at least 12,000 years old, and we know that the real dispute here, the real question is, did these people have structures and did they have agriculture? We know that they were human beings. They were essentially modern human beings. So were they hunter-gatherers, or did they have structures and agriculture?
Before Göbekli Tepe, they didn't have structures and they didn't have agriculture.
So
After Göbekli Tepe, they did.
So the fact that they were able to build something so monumental, what kind of a leap is it at all to think that these people could figure out how to plant food and figure out how to make a house?
Well, I mean, again, if you look back 30,000 years, 40,000 years to these cave paintings, these are pretty sophisticated.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
They are.
Clearly, they had abstract reasoning. They could think from the concrete to the abstract and so on. It's not a big reach to go from that to moving stones around.
I'd say there's a big difference between painting and engraving on cave walls.
I don't think so.
And creating,
to me, the painting is even more
and creating
sophisticated.
the largest megalithic site that's ever been built on Earth.
Wait a minute.
I think there's a huge difference between those two. I mean, nobody would compare the construction effort on Stonehenge or Gigantea with cave paintings. I agree with you. The cave paintings are magnificent. I've had the privilege to visit many of the painted caves. Stunning work. And as Picasso said when he came out of Lascaux, we have invented nothing.
Right.
I mean, they were that was that modern human mind, symbolic mind at work there. But this is another matter. This is a large-scale construction project that's going on, and it's not just a construction project. It's not like huts. It's hundreds and hundreds of very, very large megalithic pillars which have to be mobilized, brought to the place. You know, organizing a workforce in order to do that, even that requires preparation and time and learning and practice. It's not something that you wake up one morning and just can do overnight.
You think that the paintings are more impressive than Göbekli Tepe?
Yeah, or at least comparable. Yeah,
I think that's absolutely ridiculous.
To convey three-dimensionality on a 2D plane, that's what Picasso meant. It's like, wow, that's incredible. It's like developing perspective, and to use the natural shape of the walls to create a three-dimensional perspective look that's pretty abstract.
You're comparing apples and pears. It's not a construction project.
Okay,
it's not. I don't think it's even remotely. But I don't think it's even remotely.
But what
impressive.
I'm saying is that it doesn't take a huge leap of the imagination to think these people were pretty smart. They had
we know that they were smart. We know what they were smart just because of the fact that those construction projects were done by who? By whoever. We know that they were smart. Whoever built Göbekli Tepe was clearly intelligent. Whoever made those 3D carvings, clearly they were intelligent. But to think that someone drawing on cave paintings is more impressive than erecting 20-foot stone columns with three-dimensional carvings on them of a lot of animals that weren't even native to the region.
That's
is that debatable?
Not necessarily the case.
Because they could have been
the animals were native to.
But my point, Joe, is that these paintings are like, say, 30, 40,000 years old to Göbekli Tepe. So there's tens of thousands of years to develop more that we're very likely to find more archaeological sites.
And yet, up till now, we haven't found that. We haven't found all of that intermediate material. Which see, if I could actually see that intermediate material between the upper Paleolithic cave art and Göbekli Tepe, if I could see the gradual evolution and development of skills, I wouldn't need to invoke a lost civilization, the survivors of a lost civilization who've mastered those skills elsewhere, to come in and teach those skills at Göbekli Tepe. But it still looks to me like a transfer of technology, unless you can show me that evolutionary process whereby I can understand how this group of hunter-gatherers became equipped to create this giant site, where they practiced, where they learned the skills to move the stones, to organize the workforce, to feed and water the workforce in a rather dry place. All of that is actually quite a logistical challenge.
Yep, and obviously somebody met it somehow.
Some humans.
Yes,
right. So the
right,
real question
right.
is, did they have structures? Did they have agriculture? Did they have some sort of a
Probably-
community where they lived in an
probably
established
something like
location?
that. I would imagine
So that would push back the time where we thought that there was a civilization. That would push them back into a realm of at least stepping out of the hunter-gatherer stage.
Now,
correct?
your guy Schmidt, as you show in your book, he did not go as far as you go.
Certainly not.
Right.
No.
But he admitted it's a mystery. Okay, why? That would be the scientific approach. I don't know what it is. Great mystery. Let's just wait and see. Versus, I'm going to postulate a lost civilization. Nothing wrong with that, Graham. It's a free country, and scientists do this all the time, as you've mentioned.
There's a rather humorous thing, which I have to say. Actually, I might even ask Jamie to pull up the couple of images of Fingerprints of the Gods. That's the book I'm best known for. And when I published Fingerprints of the Gods in 1995, essentially I was saying civilization is much older and much more mysterious than we thought. And I was ridiculed for proposing that. 2013, one of the magazines that ridiculed me, New Scientist magazine in Britain, publishes as a cover story picture of Göbekli Tepe and the headline: civilization is much older and much more mysterious than we thought.
Arm and abs today, and some caps.
And scientists do this. I mean, I've followed paleoanthropology for my whole adult life. And one of the big mysteries is, how did we get a big brain? How do we get to abstract reasoning from say, what chimps can do? No one knows.
The doubling of the human brain size over a period of 2 million years,
and because no one knows, every couple of years there's a new book out. It's climate change. It was
the throwing arm, cooking
that's
food.
That's right, cooking meat. You know, meat is another big one. A Harvard professor, meat. Okay, and these books come and go, and some of them have legs, some of them don't, and it's just the way it goes.
And then there's Terence McKenna's
pretty
theory.
obvious it was psychedelics.
Yeah, that's Terence McKenna's
Not that
stoned
made the
ape
brain
theory.
bigger, but that switched the brain
is this
on.
the old Julian,
Julian Jaynes, no, the bicameral mind, not at all. This is David Lewis Williams, who's professor of anthropology at the University of Witwatersrand in South Africa. His neuropsychological theory of cave art, all kudos to Terence McKenna and Food of the Gods. What a brilliant thinker, what a brilliant alternative thinker. But David Lewis Williams at the University of Witwatersrand had been working on this problem since 1973, and his argument is that the remarkable similarities that we see in rock and cave art all around the world are explained that we're dealing with a shamanistic art. Shamanism involves altered states of consciousness. This is typical visions of altered states of consciousness, and it seems to have accompanied a great leap forward in human behavior.
And you covered this in your book.
I covered it in Supernatural.
Supernatural.
As did Richard Wrangham's theory. This is a highly regarded scientist at Harvard. So he's the meat eating guy. That it's cooking meat.
Right.
So by cooking the protein, that's what gives you the energy to build a huge brain. All right. So now this guy is starting with 10 pluses on his side. He's Harvard and already respected, and even so, his book was like, maybe.
Well, it's probably a series of different events and a bunch of different factors.
That's right. Could be a number of different things.
So let's get away from Göbekli Tepe and ancient civilizations, and let's get back to the geological evidence, which, Randall, you're an expert at. And this is one of the main things that you had a dispute with, and this is one of the reasons why we got everybody together. Now, what is your thoughts on what Randall and Graham proposed, specifically Randall, who is much more on the geological side of things?
Yeah. Well, this is why I brought in my phone a friend,
right.
a geologist. So by way of background, after your show, I thought, let's just give this a fair hearing. This is what we do. So this will be our cover story, and I think the end of summer issue comes out. We're only quarterly.
I hope that Mark Defant is going to be doing some more work on the draft of his article for you that is up online, because that article is full of bullshit statements about me which are demonstrably false.
Well, he's on.
Yeah,
here,
he's
so
there, and
you
I'm
can-
happy
you
to.
can
I'm happy
ask
to
him.
engage
What
with those
statements, Graham?
particular issues. Well, I'll have to put on my reading glasses.
And that, whatever article's online, this has not been published yet.
Well,
so
it
this is-
claims that it's a draft of the article that will appear in a 2017 edition of Skeptic magazine.
So pull it up, Graham, and
Sure.
Why
give
don't we
you a
bring
chance to
Mark
have your
on
time in
and,
court.
Yeah.
Let's let Graham go over it first,
So-
and then we'll have Mark on
So
to
here's
refute what he said.
Defant on Magicians of the Gods. And by the way, Michael, I mean, you say that you're here to, to respectfully aim to get at the truth.
Yeah.
There it is, conjuring
let
up
me-
a lost civilization from
Yeah,
nothing.
let me just get to the top of this. I've got it here. Just bear with me a second. So, amongst the words in Mark Defant's article, he is accusing me of duping the public. He's saying that I'm public enemy number one. He's accusing me of arm waving. I admit I do wave my arms. Pontificating. Well, my grandfather was a minister of the church. Little interest in peer-reviewed research. Claimed that no academic would debate. That's utter bullshit. I had a debate with Zahi Hawass. He's a leading Egyptian Egyptologist. Back in 2015, it was not my fault that Zahi Hawass walked out on that debate. I can play the video if you like, a minute and a half of Zahi Hawass lambasting me and then walking out and refusing to debate further. So it's bullshit to say I don't debate or I'm not willing to debate. And finally, he says that I'm conning a hellacious number of people into buying his books. Now, how can we get any dialogue going when somebody begins like that? And
Okay.
then would you like some further? Bear with me, because I just have to scroll down and I don't have a mouse. I don't have a mouse. So Hancock and Carlson claimed several times that no academic would debate them. Not true. I'm accused of doing an about face since Fingerprints of the Gods. Are my views not allowed to evolve with new evidence? Is that somehow a
Well, I think
crime on my part? Let me just finish.
Yeah.
Then a cheap shot. He cites Jesus Gamarra. And accuses me of not having the scientific knowledge to deal with issues of gravitation. Now, it's true that Jesus Gamarra, who is a descendant of the Incas, who has worked 70 years on the megaliths of Sacsayhuaman, whose father before him, Alfredo Gamarra, worked 70 years. It's true that he's got a way-out theory about gravitation. Thing is, I state in my book that it's a way-out theory. What I go on to say, quoted in the attack, is that, however, this isn't the part of his theory I'm interested in. Where I feel he is solidly persuasive is in his observations of the anomalous character of the monuments of the Andes, etc., etc. Defant doesn't cite that. He just presents me as buying what Jesus Gamarra says. I mean, if that's the standard that you're going to have in Skeptic magazine, you have a serious problem. And then Göbekli Tepe, he contends that Göbekli Tepe is too advanced to have been completed by hunter-gatherers and must have been constructed by a more advanced civilization. Well, no, that's not what I say. I say it was constructed by hunter-gatherers, but that they were advised and supported by people who had knowledge of this kind of work beforehand.
How is that different?
Well, I think it's very different. I'm not saying it was constructed by. I'm saying that a group of people settled amongst hunter-gatherers and transferred some skills for them. He says that, he quotes me, Hancock makes the following stunning claim, quote, "Our ancestors are being initiated into the secrets of metals and how to make swords and knives." I do not make that claim. I'm reporting that this claim is made in the Book of Enoch. That is not my claim. Then what else?
So you don't think that's the explanation?
Well, I'm being misrepresented by your author here.
But I mean, all right, but
if he wants to represent me, if he accuses me of cherry picking, he shouldn't cherry pick my statements. He should quote it in full context.
We're still working on this. Let's get it right.
Well, it's
so
out there. It's out there on the internet.
Well.
You're still working on it, but it's published online.
Here's a beautiful one.
I didn't know it was online.
Here's a beautiful one. He cites Klaus Schmidt on the character. Schmidt makes a salient point, almost as if he anticipated Hancock's book. Quote, "Fabulous or mythical creatures such as centaurs or the sphinx, winged bulls or horses, do not yet occur in the iconography, and therefore in the mythology of prehistoric times. They must be recognized as creations of the high cultures which arose later." Well, bullshit, bullshit, bullshit. You've just been talking about the painted caves. Go to Chauvet Cave. You will see a lion man, Hohensteinstadel, lion man carved out of mammoth ivory. Go to Chauvet, bison man, straddling lion woman. Her right arm is transforming into the head of a lion. So certainly these mythical creatures did exist in the Upper Paleolithic, and it's rubbish to say that they didn't. I mean, how can I go on? The teapot. Oh, yeah. Okay, so he's taking issue with me because I suggest that the vulture on pillar 43 in enclosure D is representing the teapot asterism of the constellation of Sagittarius, and he goes and gives us little things of Uncle Sam and some other thing that he shows. You know, anybody can impose any image on anything. Well, it's not my fault that a couple of academics who didn't even talk to me and had nothing whatsoever to do to me have published a major study in the, I quote it again, the Mediterranean Archaeology and Archaeometry, a peer-reviewed journal, where they make precisely that identification. So at least I'm not alone. At least there are peer-reviewed credentialed scholars who also agree that that figure is representing the teapot asterism within the constellation of Sagittarius. No reference to that. Schock's opinions, we're supposed to not go into the minutiae because they've already been dismissed by a study by Liritsis and Vafiadou. Far from it. That study doesn't dismiss Schock at all. None of that study was done on the body of the Sphinx itself. It was done in the valley and the Sphinx temples. And by the way, the dates are extremely troubling. Some of them could push it as far as 3600 BC that the work was done, or as early in some cases as 1000 BC. I don't think that study proves anything, and so on and so forth.
Just to clarify what you do believe then, so that we don't misrepresent you, so you don't think that the lost civilization instructed them on the use of metals?
I don't know. I don't see evidence for that in
But
Göbekli Tepe.
why would you put that in the book then?
I didn't put it in the book. I was quoting the Book of Enoch. It's a huge passage on the Book of Enoch. It's me, not me who's saying that. It's the Book of Enoch that's saying that.
I understand, but why? I forget
all I
what the
all I
context.
require your defant to do is to state that Hancock is citing the Book of Enoch. He didn't do that.
Okay.
That is what's the word?
Fair enough.
Disingenuous? Is that the polite word you guys use?
But
it seems more than disingenuous. It's a character assassination.
Well, but the question is why would? What's the context of including that in your book? I forget.
Well, the context is that actually I was criticizing Zechariah Sitchin. That's primarily what I was doing.
So you don't think that a lost civilization instructed the people who built Göbekli Tepe on the use of metals and tools?
I see no evidence for that. I see Göbekli Tepe. I can't go say they instructed them on the use of metals and tools unless I can find evidence for it.
Well, so what did they do?
We don't know.
They generated agriculture. They created a center of excellence around which a hunter-gatherer...
not they who built Göbekli Tepe. The lost civilization that advised them that you think happened.
Yeah.
What did they do if they...
They've come through a cataclysm. They're survivors, few in number. This is my scenario. You don't have to accept it. I'm sure you don't. They take refuge amongst hunter-gatherers. I mean, I don't know. You're probably have some survival skills. I don't have many. I mean, if we were to have a comet impact in the world today, which were to take out all the underpinnings of modern civilization, I might go settle with hunter-gatherers because they're the people who know best how to live in that situation.
I have no survival skills.
Yeah, so go settle amongst hunter-gatherers. But I might be able to transfer some of my knowledge to them. I might have something that I could transfer to them, and I might have very strong reasons why I might not choose to transfer all of it.
But so, in other words, perhaps this is what happened. Okay, maybe, but how is that different from Zechariah Sitchin's? Well, the aliens advised it.
Well,
I don't need. Lot different.
I think it's massively different, especially since Zechariah Sitchin has his aliens arriving here in 1970s NASA technology. Weirdly, he wrote his book in the 1970s. I mean, I don't go there. I don't make that. I don't make that suggestion. I'm simply saying, perhaps there's been a forgotten episode in human history. Perhaps its fingerprints are present at a number of sites around the world, but perhaps the extremely defensive, arrogant, and patronizing attitude of mainstream academia is stopping us from considering that possibility, and therefore I campaign to get that possibility considered, and I try to do so with as loud a voice as possible.
Well, you're doing it. You're doing it, man.
But doesn't it disturb you that you run Skeptic magazine and someone publishes something like that? I mean, that goes against the whole idea of critical thinking. I mean, it's misrepresenting his quotes, it's misrepresenting his perspective, his point of view. It's really disingenuous.
This is one reason we're doing this, so we could get his...
But why would anybody write something like that, and why would you guys publish something like that without checking the facts?
We are. This was not supposed to be posted online.
And why is
this
such a
person...
It's online, though. How does something get online if it's not supposed to?
Why is such a person who will do that a useful contributor to your side of the debate?
one of the reasons we're here is to get your point of view exactly right. All right, so you're saying that there's no evidence that any lost civilization exists. Only the
I'm not saying that. I'm
only
saying,
the fingerprints of their influence on later peoples we do know existed.
I'm saying there are physical objects. I say Göbekli Tepe is one of them. I say the Sphinx is another.
But see, this is that argument from either ignorance or personal incredulity. I don't accept the mainstream, or I can't think of how this pyramids could have been built, therefore it was built by somebody else through some other technology.
That's not what he's saying. They're just post-dating it. They're just,
what I'm saying is the Sphinx is older. I do go with Robert Schoch's argument on the geology. I'm also very interested in the astronomy of the site. And again, I have slides that I could show on this if we have time. You might want to get into Ed Krupp's criticism of the Orion correlation and why he says it's upside down. I can talk to you about that. You know.
We do. I mean, I know Ed Krupp's argument about that. That was from the 90s, I think.
What's your thoughts on Robert Schoch's conclusions?
I don't. That's not something I know much about.
Well, you
should. That's a huge factor. It's a huge factor. Because it's all about water erosion.
Mark knows about Schoch, and he rejects him on the basis of that paper.
Yeah.
And that paper really doesn't date the Sphinx. It works with dating of large blocks in the valley and the Sphinx temples. There's not a single sample taken from the Sphinx.
All right, then who dated it?
Who dated it? Liritsis and Vafiadou.
And then why do mainstream archaeologists not accept the older date for the Sphinx? And the answer is because they have a bunch of other evidence that points to the date that they think it does.
The answer is to your question is very simple. Mark Lehner and Zahi Hawass put it on record back in 1992 when John Anthony West and Robert Schoch first presented the rainfall erosion evidence on the Sphinx. And what Lehner and Hawass said is, the Sphinx can't possibly be 12,000 plus years old because there was no other culture anywhere in the world that was capable of creating large-scale monumental architecture like this. Show me one other structure that's capable of doing that. Well, they could say that in 1992, Michael, but they can't say it in 2017, not since Göbekli Tepe's been excavated.
If you don't mind, Graham, could you please, for people, so this could be a standalone thing, people could understand, what is the argument about the Sphinx, the enclosure of the Sphinx? And Dr. Robert Schoch from Boston University, who's a geologist, what was his conclusion?
What Schoch is saying is that the Sphinx and the trench out of which the Sphinx is cut bears the unmistakable evidence of precipitation-induced weathering caused by exposure to a substantial period of heavy rainfall. And that is particularly pointed out in the vertical fissures in the trench. So you see, the Sphinx itself has been subject to so much restoration over so many years that it's difficult for people to even see the core body of the Sphinx today. But it's these, you can see the vertical fissures even down at the back of there. That is what Schoch counts as rainfall, precipitation-induced weathering, heavy rainfall, which is selectively removing the softer layers and leaving the harder layers in place. And the problem is we don't have that rainfall in Giza, in Egypt, 4,500 years ago. You have to go back much earlier to get that rainfall. That's the suggestion.
So that's the suggestion by Robert Schoch, independently of your conclusions.
Totally independently, yeah. Schoch disagrees with me on many things, as a matter of fact, and I disagree with him on many things, but I think he's on the money on this.
So that alone would set back at least that one. I mean, it's pretty much established that the Great Pyramid of Giza was constructed about 2,500 BC, right?
There's absolutely no doubt that a huge project went on at Giza around 2,500 BC.
So your argument is not that the whole thing was that much older, was that parts of it seem to have been from an earlier civilization, or at least that civilization far, far earlier than was.
I would say that the ground plan, what we have at Giza, the basic layout of the site, was established in what the ancient Egyptians called Zep Tepi, the first time. Astronomically and geologically, I and my colleagues suggest that the first time can be dated to the period of about 12,500 to 13,000 years ago. That was when the site was laid out, because there's intriguing astronomical alignments of the Great Pyramids to the Belt of Orion. I know Ed Krupp has a completely opposite view on this, and of the Great Sphinx to the constellation of Leo, rising due east, housing the sun on the equinox, the astrological age of Leo. Again, I have slides I can.
And that would align with the geological evidence that Robert Schoch concludes.
It aligns with the geological evidence. The age of Leo pretty much exactly spans the Younger Dryas, as a matter of fact.
And so the only argument against that at the time was that there were no other structures like that from 12,000 years
ago. Correct. And then Krupp said that the Orion correlation wasn't real because it was upside down. I mean, do you want to get into that now?
Well, first, that's not the only argument. It's that, okay, if the Sphinx is built, or the layout for the whole thing is built in, say 10, 11,000 years ago, and then the pyramids are built, 2,500 BC. What happened in between? Where are all the people, the trash, the places where they lived?
Well, there's a
in that
bunch
area?
of different styles of construction.
Something like
but not dated in between.
I would propose, Michael, something like a monastery, which has a relatively small archaeological footprint, is on the site. I mean, the idea of information, knowledge, and traditions lasting for thousands of years within a religious system shouldn't be too absurd to us. I mean, Judaism is dealing with ideas that are already best part of 4,000 years old if we go back to Ur of the Chaldees and so on and so forth. So that's all I'm suggesting, really, that the idea is preserve, maintain, that the survivors of the on the site, but in something like a monastery, which has got a very small archaeological footprint. It is not high. Perhaps, again, one can only speculate, and I think there's a lot of speculation on the archaeological side too. One can only speculate, perhaps having gone through a cataclysm, perhaps they felt to blame for this, wrongly or rightly. I mean, there are many, many traditions in which humanity's behavior is implicated in the cataclysm that takes place. And perhaps they didn't want to switch civilization on completely right there. Perhaps they waited, passed down the knowledge through initiates. Enough was there to create a mystery, because it's undoubtedly a mystery that the construction of the Great Pyramids, the first huge pyramids in Egypt, preceded only really by the Zoser pyramid at Saqqara, that the construction of the Great Pyramids is vastly superior to the construction of the pyramids of the 5th and 6th dynasty that follow it. And that's a little bit counterintuitive, that we have this collapse in skills. One would have expected it to got better. So it sounds like the work on the pyramids started already with a level of knowledge in hand.
Yes, but okay, so here's how I would think about that. There's a lot of perhapsing and maybes because yes, well, so you have a bunch of Egyptologists and archaeologists who have been working on this site for centuries. This is one of the most ancient mysteries and so on. And so let's say there's like 20 lines of evidence that point to built roughly around this time period here. And then you come on and say, okay, but there's this one anomaly of the rain thing there was only rain at this time. Now there's a huge gap. You have one anomaly or line of evidence here and like 20 here.
Well, we're talking about different structures, though. There's not a lot of evidence that points to the Sphinx being from a particular time period.
Well, he's saying like 12,000, right?
I'm saying the rainfall evidence suggests
right,
that.
But other evidence.
And
so
its alignment with the constellation of Leo housing the sun at dawn on the spring equinox. It's an equinoctial marker. Nobody would dispute that. Nobody would dispute that the ancient Egypt... Well, no. I mean, if you make a monument pointing perfectly Jewish... I've stood on the back of the Sphinx at dawn on the spring equinox, and believe me... Again, I could show a picture. Its head lines up perfectly with the rising sun. No, I don't think anybody, even Krupp, is disputing that it's an equinoctial marker. Now, here's the thing. You're an ancient Egyptian. You're building an equinoctial marker in 2,500 BC. Do you know what constellation is housing the sun in 2,500 BC?
I haven't run the little program.
Well, it's the constellation of Taurus. So logically, if you're creating an equinoctial... And the ancient Egyptians were not shy about making images of bulls. Plenty of them. If you're making an equinoctial marker in 2,500 BC, you really should create it in the form of a bull, not in the form of a lion. That's the puzzling issue. And yet we do have a time when a lion constellation housed the sun at dawn on the spring equinox, and that is the period of the Younger Dryas.
Okay, I'd say that's a pretty big leap.
Well, I know you'd say that, and your colleagues all say that too.
And so now, and then we have a gap of about 5,000 or 6,000 years where there's nothing. There's no.
Well, let me interject there.
Yeah, please do.
I'm going to refer back to several articles that were published in the 80s and 90s. This one is from Nature, early 80s, late Quaternary history of the Nile. And what it's discussing is the evidence that there was a major shift in the hydraulic regime of the Nile River. It says between 20,000 and 12,000 years before present, when timberline in the headwaters was lower, vegetation cover more open than today, the Nile was a highly seasonal braided river, which brought mixed coarse and fine sediments down to Egypt and Sudan. This cold, dry interval had ended by 12,500 years before present, when overflow from Lake Victoria and higher rainfall in Ethiopia sent extraordinary floods down the main Nile. And those floods have been documented to have been 120 feet above the modern floodplain of the Nile. Any civilization, or whatever you want to call it, living along the Nile River at that time would have had to abandon whatever they were doing there in this regime, this intensified hydraulic regime. And it goes on to say, it marked a revolutionary change to continuous flow with a superimposed flood peak. So what happened is that there was a major environmental change that occurred right there around 12,000 to 12,500 years. The dating could be adjusted somewhat since the early 80s, but the point is made is that because of a major hydrological change, major vegetational cover change, major environmental change, this would have caused also imposed changes upon whatever culture was existing there or living there at the time. Now what we have is, in the aftermath of that event, we have basically the emergence of desert, which now would require serious adaptation. It's very likely, too, that these events could have also decimated the population at the time, leaving basically no workforce. And then over a period of 2,000 or 3,000 or 4,000 years, you find that there's enough of a recovery that these kind of monumental structures can be renewed. But it's clear from this and a lot of other studies in the Eastern Mediterranean showing that there are sap-repel layers, which is basically material that has been washed in from the continental surface that has not oxidized. It has essentially become rotten and carried in, organic material carried in off of the continents by this enhanced regime of water flow, actually forcing so much water that there was a freshwater lid on the Eastern Mediterranean that caused a cessation in the circulation between the upper waters and the lower waters, reducing the amount of oxygen brought down to the lower waters. And so you had these layers of mud that formed on the bottom of the Mediterranean that show this massive influx of fresh water flowing out of the Nile and off of the Egyptian continent at this same time. So clearly the evidence shows that there were major climatic changes that occurred around this time. It is not so speculative to imagine that whoever, whatever, and we don't have to invoke any kind of a super advanced civilization, but whatever cultures were there that were perhaps capable of carving blocks of stone, transporting blocks of stone, as they were at Göbekli Tepe during this time range, would have been that their activity would have been interrupted to the extent that it might have taken millennia to recover, to get the labor force necessary to undertake major monumental programs on the Giza Plateau. So I think that if we assume this gradualistic scenario, yeah, that's a fair question to ask. What happened in that interval? But if there is a major climatic downturn and a major disruption of the settled patterns of whatever culture was already there, then, now we might have an explanation why there would be a gap, especially if these events caused a bottleneck in the population of the area. Of course, this is all speculative, but it is not speculative to say that there is multiple lines of evidence suggesting these major, even cataclysmic changes that engulfed that part of the world during that era. So that could provide an explanation of why there is a gap there.
Makes a ton of sense.
Well, it does it because...
Does it not?
Only if you have to have the Sphinx in conjunction with 12,000 years ago in the lost civilization. If you just say the rainwater erosion on the Sphinx is not an explanation for the age, and that the traditional accepted age is what we think it is, then there's no gap to fill.
Yeah.
So really, all we're talking about is we have, again, lots of evidence here, one anomaly here. I really want the anomaly thing to stick, so I got to explain the gap. The gap is explained by environmental changes.
Yeah,
Okay,
but what is the
but
lots of evidence other than a lot of assumptions?
It's
and
all
a lot
assumptions.
of maybes?
It's all. I mean, actually, can you cite me a single contemporary inscription from the date that the Sphinx is supposed to have been made that refers to the Sphinx?
I'm sorry. Say that
Can
again?
you cite a single contemporary inscription
Contemporary
from
time.
ancient, contemporary to the date that Egyptologists ascribed to the Sphinx? In other words, to the reign of Khufu. Can you cite me a single inscription that talks about the Sphinx being built?
This is not. I don't study this area. I don't know.
Okay, well, you can't, because there is no such inscription.
Okay, well, so?
Well, one would have thought there would be.
Well, maybe.
It's a giant project. It's 270 feet long. It's 70 feet high. It's carved out of solid rock. Nothing.
Okay, but you have
no
all
reference to
these
it
other-
at all in the Old Kingdom. You actually have to come down to the New Kingdom to get references to the Sphinx in inscriptions.
So, but you've already said that the pyramids were built at the time we think they were built, not thousands of years
I would say
ago.
that a great deal of work was done on the pyramids at the time of 2500 BC.
And
I think the ground plan was laid out earlier.
And we have like the step pyramid, which is cruder and not as well designed as the other pyramids. That's a transitional stage at that time.
Often argued to be a transitional stage. Have
Yeah,
you've been
yeah.
to the step pyramid, I'm sure.
No, not.
Right, and you've been to Giza, though.
No, I've never been to Giza.
Oh dear. Well, they do make a very different impact. I mean, I've climbed the Great Pyramid 5 times,
Well,
and
but-
I mean, you're dealing with something orders of magnitude different in terms of what's required. I mean, this thing weighs 6 million
Oh, I
tons.
understand, but-
It's 481 feet high. It consists of 2.5 million individual blocks of stone. It's aligned to true north within 3/60ths of a single degree. I mean, to compare that to Zoser is really not a valid comparison at all. What's more interesting to me is the radical decline that takes place in pyramid building skills in the 5th and 6th dynasty. Go to Unas, go to Pepi, go to Teti at Saqqara. These are a shambles. You can hardly even recognize them as a pyramid. What happened to all that knowledge that's invested in the Great Pyramid? Why does Egypt devolve so rapidly? How do we explain this pristine, amazing work that's done on the Great Pyramid unless there's a legacy of knowledge being attached to it?
Okay, so every archaeologist, Egyptian archaeologist and Egyptiologist knows everything you just said.
They do.
And they don't accept any of your arguments. Why not?
That's why I'm needed, because somebody's got to counter this.
Is it just that they're closed-minded and they follow Zahi Hawass and they never think for themselves?
You want to see a
Or-
closed mind? I'll play you a 1.5-minute video of Zahi Hawass
Okay,
refusing to
yeah,
debate with me.
But all of them, every one of the Egyptologists and archaeologists over the last 2 centuries and so on, they're all dogmatically closed-minded and they can't see the arguments as clear as you? Or is it they're not convinced by your argument?
They're not convinced by my argument. They genuinely and absolutely believe that their argument is right. The notion that I'm proposing is apparently so preposterous to them that it isn't even worthy of consideration, but it is worthy of insults and attacks on me, on my integrity, on my decency as a human being, on my honesty. All of those things get attacked, you know, because mainstream, and that's fine, I'm ready for that. And by the way, I know that archaeologists, academics constantly attack each other all the time. I used to take this stuff personally, but then when I see what they do to each other, the ravaging attack dogs are let loose on any new idea. I sometimes wish scientists would actually look for what's good in a new idea rather than what's bad.
Oh,
but
well,
I get why they do look for what's bad.
But in other words, some young graduate student working in that area could make a name for himself by overturning,
My son was a young graduate student at the University of Cardiff studying Egyptology. He got marked down in his degree because he proposed the possibility that the pyramids and the Sphinx might be or might have older origins. He was impressed by my work. It did him a lot of harm in his degree.
And if all this was true, then eventually
you haven't answered my point.
It would come
you
out.
haven't answered my point.
Which is
if
what?
you go against the mainstream view, your career does not progress as an Egyptologist.
I disagree. I mean,
Give me an example.
How is it that we know anything that we know about Egyptology
Give me an example
now?
from Egyptology of somebody who's gone against the mainstream view and been lauded for so doing.
Well, look, we don't believe everything about it that we believed 2 centuries ago, at, say, Napoleon's time, right? How did all that knowledge come about? How did all the change in that science
Well,
develop?
it really begins with Champollion and the deciphering of the Rosetta Stone. and
All right,
so
how
on.
was he able to do that against the mainstream?
There was no mainstream
All right, so
that he was
this is my-
against. There
this
was
is
no
my
mainstream. The
point.
mainstream has taken time to form, and it's very solid now.
I mean, scientists-
Egyptologists all sing from the same hymn book. You'll find very little disagreement amongst
But this
them on
is
anything.
true in every field. But somehow or another, Einstein managed to make an impact because he turned out to be right.
Well, I'm no Einstein, and I don't know if I'm right, but I'm going to continue to oppose that mainstream.
and-
Somebody
I
has
don't
to.
know. That's a valid comparison. Einstein and archaeology.
All right, well, take paleoanthropology. I mean, it's a completely different field now than a century ago. How did that happen if no one ever accepts new ideas? They do. It happens all the time.
Well, they're being forced to accept Göbekli Tepe, and that's a new idea. You know where you were talking about things taking a long time, and what seems like a long time to us is really a blink of the eye in terms of archaeology. We're in the middle of that. We're essentially in the middle of that with things like Göbekli Tepe, with Forbes publishing an article about the Younger Dryas possibly being impacted by comets and that being one of the causes of a mass extinction.
Right, and when
these are all mainstream ideas now.
And when Alvarez proposed the impact hypothesis for the demise of the dinosaurs in 1980, it was ridiculed, but he turned out to be right, and then that became the accepted.
Right, it takes time.
Well, but what was the key
and
turning?
Now people are challenging that.
Wasn't the key turning point the finding of the crater? That's what made the difference.
Yeah,
it's
so
kind of hard to argue with that.
So again, where's your crater?
Just in
this
time
is where
for
perhaps
the
we need to bring
flex.
in
This
our
is literally the
friends.
time I was about to
Malcolm
flex the
Lecomp's
innovator.
one of the younger Dryas impact scientists. I mean, the point being made is the following.
Care about my
Firstly, that
streams and
the
my
primary
flex and
impacts
everything.
were on ice. There may have been as many as 4 impacts, that they were on the North American ice cap. Some craters have been suggested, for example, very deep holes in the Great Lakes. Other craters have been and will be looked at by the team in the coming months, whether it includes the Coruscant crater, the Quebec terrain, and so on and so forth. There are candidates. The crater has not been found yet, but I would be surprised if a crater was easy to find when the impact is on 2-mile deep ice. And one of the biggest strewn fields in the world, which is the Australian tektite strewn field, there's no crater associated with that. But
We might read somebody.
the impact proxies. There's enough of them to justify that, and that's what's going on around this impact hypothesis.
So, on
now.
a related question to that is not the lost
Thanks for being
civilizations and the demise of humans, but the megafaunal extinction of North American mammals.
Everybody.
So this has been long debated before the impact hypothesis was proposed, and the competing hypotheses were overhunting. Humans just hunted them to the point
we might
not
not
every
read
last one, to
anybody.
the point where the population numbers get too low and these species can't survive.
Can we read
Or
Dogger?
climate change, or both. The climate change weakened the populations, then the humans came over and overhunted them. All right, so and then the impact hypothesis is proposed. Okay, so this was debated, and
Hey,
it didn't
we
fare
can
that
read
well
him now.
because there were a lot of
The son of a gun.
mammals and other species that didn't go extinct that you would expect from a massive impact like that. It would have wiped out. Why the selected species, the kinds of species that humans would hunt, are the ones that went extinct, whereas these others didn't.
Well,
Five
why
viewers
is
on
hunting
screen.
Point
the
again.
largest? There's no evidence that humans hunted the predators. There is evidence that they hunted woolly mammoths, but it's a very sparse. I mean, you have no more than a dozen sites that show association between human hunting and mammoths, and a lot of those, like the Lubbock Lake